Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Deku fell in love with Shouto? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Izuku keeps in touch with Todoroki throughout the rest of his hospital stay, so he knows when he gets released and when he's flying back to Japan. Still, when there's a knock on his apartment door, the same evening Todoroki happens to return, Izuku doesn't have a clue who it could be. He's entirely caught off guard when he opens it to find Todoroki standing there in a hoodie and sweats, his hair messy and unstyled, carrying a plastic bag that turns out to be takeout. You're here. Izuku squeaks, an unnecessary question considering yes, Todoroki is very clearly there on Izuku's doorstep in all his dressed-down glory. My flight just landed, Todoroki says. Is now a bad time? A bad time for what? Izuku wonders. For a famous pro-hero and extreme object of his affection to show up unannounced at his door. No, come in, he says. He stands aside to let Todoroki slip past him. As Izuku shuts the door, he thinks he should have thought this through better, because suddenly his tiny apartment contains exactly 100% more Todoroki than it did before, and he's not sure what to do about it. Did you already eat? Todoroki asks. No, Izuku says. I brought you curry, Todoroki tells him, somewhat hopefully, like maybe the food will result in him being better received. Oh, that's so. He wants to say nice, or convey how thankful he is in some way, but now that Todoroki has stepped into the light of his apartment, Izuku can see the signs of the fight he'd been in overseas. There's a fading bruise on his jaw and a mostly healed cut on his cheek, and Izuku forgets what he started to say because his chest goes all sore with worry again. At the same time his stomach goes fuzzy and hot with something else. Todoroki is very attractive when he's a bit roughed up. I should have called ahead, Todoroki says abruptly. I didn't know if you'd be here, but I knew if I told you I was coming you'd feel like you had to meet me, and I didn't want it to be an inconvenience, so I just showed up. But now that feels like maybe even more of an inconvenience. He trails off awkwardly, and Izuku realizes that his own lack of response is probably unnerving Todoroki. Izuku waves his hands anxiously. No, sorry, Izuku starts to say, and then stops, because he still doesn't know what to say. He's so happy to see Todoroki he can't even find the words to tell him. It's not an inconvenience. It's not. Todoroki asks. Nope. Izuku gives him an encouraging thumbs up for good measure. Not at all. Todoroki stares at the plastic bag of food he's holding. I was just thinking about what your reaction would be if I surprised you with takeout curry, Izuku says. Not that he'd turn his nose up at that. It's just so cute. He reaches out to take the food, and Todoroki relinquishes it. And coming here, Todoroki clarifies. Izuku blinks at him. You came here just to surprise me. Todoroki starts to nod, and then shakes his head. Actually, I don't know what I was. I'll just go now. I know you're probably in the middle of studying. Or, he starts to reach for the door. Wait, Izuku yelps. Todoroki freezes, and Izuku panics, slightly. He doesn't really get why Todoroki wanted to do all this, but he doesn't want Todoroki to leave, either. You should stay. Oh, only if you want to, though. Sorry, I'm not trying to make you. Todoroki is giving him this look like he has no idea what Izuku is trying to say, which is fair, because neither does Izuku. I want you to stay, I just can't believe you're here. I'm so happy you are, though. Oh, this makes Todoroki smile faintly. I wanted to see you when I got back. Izuku presses the backs of his hands to his cheeks as he feels them grow hot. His mom's words keep bubbling up in his head. He likes you, he likes you, he likes you. Well, okay, it's definitely true that people probably don't pay visits to someone they don't like immediately after flying home from an international business trip that ended with them in the hospital. Izuku has logically had to accept a while ago that Todoroki does like spending time with him, but he still can't wrap his head around what his mom is talking about. There's no way Todoroki could like him that way, how could he? Todoroki is amazing, and he could find someone amazing to be with as easily as breathing if he wanted. He deserves to fall for someone amazing. And Izuku is fine with that, because even getting to be Todoroki's friend is so much more than he'd ever dreamed would happen. He smiles back at Todoroki. I'm glad you're home safely. And kind of starving, Todoroki admits. Oh, I'll clear some space. If there's one thing Izuku can say about his life, it's that it has led him to places he never thought it would. Primarily, sitting on his bed eating curry out of plastic containers with Todoroki Shouto while they discuss his vast collection of hero figurines. So, that one's your favorite, Todoroki says, pointing at the detailed 7-inch figure of All Might that Izuku has been waxing on about fondly for several minutes. Yes, Izuku says. It was extremely limited edition, too. I actually begged my mom to let me stay home from school that day to try and buy him as soon as they started selling it, and she let me. He'd scared her half to death with the volume of his scream after he'd managed to get one. Todoroki makes a noise of appreciation. I wish I could have got one of those, too. You couldn't? Izuku asks, surprised. With how rich and well-connected the Todorokis are, he can't imagine it being a problem. My old man would have made me train until I puked if I'd tried to pull that, Todoroki tells him. He was never really too happy about All Might being my favorite hero. He is. Izuku gasps. Yeah, Todoroki says. By the time I got to high school, I thought I'd outgrown stuff like that, but All Might proved me wrong. He's as amazing as everyone always says. Izuku lets out a wheeze of excitement. Really? Todoroki nods. Eraserhead is, too. He was your homeroom teacher, Izuku says excitedly. He can barely even comprehend something so cool. Yeah, Todoroki says, and he kicked my ass almost every day. What was the training like? Izuku asks. That Yui. There's a lot of info about Yui, but very little about the standard curriculum is known. In fact, it tends to be a pretty closely guarded secret, both for the safety and the success of its students. This is Izuku's chance to learn from one of its brightest alumni. Brutal, Todoroki tells him. I learned more in 3 years there about using my quirk than I had the rest of my life. Even though Endeavor trained you. Todoroki shakes his head. My relationship with my dad was a lot worse when I was younger. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed it's still pretty shaky now. But I was I was kind of FC ked up when I got to Yui. Izuku listens to all this with wide eyes. If you don't want to talk about it, it's fine, it's just not really a pleasant story, Todoroki says. I had no intention of giving anyone the time of day when I started high school, really. I just wanted to get out and reach the top on my own, so I could prove to my dad that everything he tried to teach me was bullshit. And I was kind of right, in some ways. Did you, really never use your left side? Izuku asks softly. He's heard stories about that, and still remembers the first sports festival at Yui, where Todoroki had shot through the rankings, only to be finally taken down by a young Bakugo when he'd refused to engage with his fire. Todoroki had taken second place that year. Yeah, Todoroki confirms. I hated it, hated my dad, what he'd made my life into. And a lot of what he taught me was wrong, because being a hero isn't just about being the strongest, but I didn't really get it yet, then, either. I just wanted to be the best to get back at him. Aizawa-sensei, and All Might, and everyone in my class helped me figure things out eventually, but I was a complete ass for a long time. Todoroki is so laid back these days, but Izuku can kind of imagine him, 16 and full of himself, and probably a whole lot ruder than he is now. It makes Izuku happy to know that all these people he looks up to as pro-heroes now have been helping Todoroki right from the start. And hearing that Todoroki hasn't always been fearlessly confident, and was just as unsure of himself back then as a normal kid, makes him seem a bit less untouchable. You know, I started using my fire more because it actually made people less afraid of me, Todoroki says. Not more, like I thought it would. I didn't want everyone to think I was just cold all the time. Izuku pulls his knees up to rest his chin on them thoughtfully. I think people would have figured it out, even if you only had an ice quirk. Maybe, Todoroki says, but it took me a while to even realize I couldn't always be like that. Not if I wanted to become the hero I dreamed about being as a kid. A hero like All Might, Izuku says quietly. A thought strikes him, and he shifts until he's sitting facing Todoroki, so he can stare directly at him with as much earnest intent as he can muster. Todoroki looks wary. Wouldn't it be amazing, Todoroki-san? Todoroki sighs. You're relentless. If you won Rescue of the Year. Izuku continues, leaning forward in his conviction. Todoroki leans back. All Might won it when he was just starting out. Yes, and then several more times, I'm aware. It would be like you're following in his footsteps. Izuku points out, hands held toward Todoroki placatingly. Just like you wanted. It wouldn't, Todoroki says. He slowly reaches out, pressing on Izuku's hands to push them back down. You took down that villain. And I was able to rescue all those kids because you got them to the fire escape. If I win this, it would be like I'm taking credit for you following in All Might's footsteps. What? Izuku says weakly. Todoroki-san. That's what I keep trying to tell you, Todoroki says. I owe that all to you. I don't even feel like I deserve. No, Izuku's voice is so firm it startles them both. Todoroki stops talking, eyes wide. Izuku takes a deep breath and leans closer again. This time Todoroki doesn't pull away. You deserve it, Izuku says. Because I couldn't have stopped that fire escape from falling. And I couldn't have saved Hana no matter how hard I tried. And you were ready to protect us, even when you couldn't use your quirk. You were just as normal as me at that moment, and I bet that's even scarier when you've always had a quirk to rely on before. Todoroki doesn't deny that it was scary. I haven't thought about it like that. I know, Izuku says. That's why I'm telling you now. But in the end, Todoroki says, frowning, I still wouldn't have survived if not for you. Well, I guess we rescued each other, then, Izuku says with a roll of his eyes. Todoroki's smile seems to indicate he can accept this. They can't nominate me, though, so I guess you just have to go and win for both of us. Something in Todoroki's expression clears, and when he nods again, Izuku doesn't see any more doubt in his eyes. I see. Oh, Izuku says. Somehow, he hadn't expected that to be the thing that convinced Todoroki. It makes his stomach all fluttery and light. Good. Yeah. Todoroki glances at him. Midoriya, you don't mind talking about this. We can stop. Izuku waves his hand. I'm fine. I gave up on wanting to be a hero like All Might a long time ago, so it doesn't upset me anymore. It's amazing to hear about this actually. It's stuff I've always wanted to know about you. He worries at his lip with his fingers. Sorry if that's weird. Well, I'm probably the best person to ask, Todoroki reassures him. Izuku smiles. Thanks for the honest answers. Anytime, Todoroki says. Also, your turn. For what? Honesty, Todoroki says. Izuku sucks in a breath and holds it, For a moment, he's worried that Todoroki is going to ask about his feelings, that maybe he already knows. Maybe he thinks he has to let Izuku down gently, or something. That would be embarrassing enough, but also unnecessary, because Izuku wouldn't dream of trying to push any of that on Todoroki. But if Todoroki feels like he does, then Izuku must be making him uncomfortable, and once it's out in the open, it can't be taken back. Why am I your favorite hero, after all might? Todoroki asks. Oh. Izuku exhales all his breath in a relieved whoosh. It takes him a moment to respond, as he processes the question, relieved it wasn't something infinitely more embarrassing. Todoroki-san, why wouldn't you be? There's so many other heroes. Todoroki exclaims, startling Izuku with how animated he suddenly is. He seems genuinely perplexed. What about Lemillion? He's All Might's successor. He's amazing, too. Izuku says. He is a pretty huge Lemillion fanboy, for sure. Then, Izuku fights the urge to cover his face. Todoroki has just told him so much, and only asked for honesty in return. Izuku can give him that much. Because, you remember how I said in the interview it was because I could tell how you try to reassure people. Todoroki nods, and he continues hesitantly. I think before you, I felt a little bit like even if I'd had a great quirk, I could never have been a hero like All Might, or Hawks, or even Lemillion when he first came out of Yui. I could never make people like me, the way they do. I'm too. Todoroki looks like he gets it. Too awkward. Izuku sighs. Yeah, I mean, you've met me. So you're saying you could see I was awkward as FCK and sensed a kindred spirit, Todoroki concludes. Basically, Izuku says, laughing, because it's true. Less so, as Todoroki has grown more confident over the years. But 18-year-old Todoroki Shouto was a whirlwind of brusque replies, blank stares, and awkwardly long pauses. But you're still the kind of hero who makes people feel safe. I don't really have the tall, brooding, handsome thing going for me, though, so it was probably always hopeless, anyway. That's incidental, Todoroki says. For what it's worth. I really think that all the stuff I didn't get about being a hero, back then, in high school, I mean, you just do. You get it. Izuku opens his mouth wide, and no words come out. It was All Might who used to tell us the story of what all the top heroes have in common, Todoroki says quietly. That the first time they ever faced danger, they moved before they had a chance to think. To save people. And that's what I saw you do. I think All Might would definitely consider you a hero. There's really no way for Izuku to respond to anyone telling him that, let alone Todoroki. He just stares glassily, and wonders if he may be going into shock. Thanks, he finally manages to whisper. Todoroki shrugs. You deserve to know. Even if you're past it, and none of that even matters anymore, I liked you right away. Todoroki-san, Izuku says, that matters. Good, Todoroki replies. They both sit in silence for a while. Izuku would like to say more, but he also feels like he could never speak again for the rest of his life, and that would be just fine. After a moment, Todoroki says, I really didn't mean to make things all intense and awkward, but apparently that's why you like me, so. The seriousness dissipates as quickly as it came on once Izuku starts giggling. I like you for more reasons than just that, now. That's a recent development, then. Todoroki asks. Maybe. Nice. Izuku grins at him, and he grins back. Thanks for letting me hang out here tonight, Todoroki says. Thank you for dinner, Izuku replies. Thanks for calling me in the hospital. Izuku huffs another laugh. Thanks for trusting me with your number. And Todoroki smiles at him. Thanks for saving me. The morning of the gala arrives a week after Todoroki gets back home. Against all odds, Izuku wakes up and discovers he's not anxious. He is a little nervous, but it's not the restless, audible heartbeat kind of anxiety he gets when he's really unable to stop worrying about something. It's only a soft flutter, these nerves, and he realizes it's more excitement than anything else that stirred him awake. Despite the monumental occasion lying ahead of him, he's not that fixated on what he might mess up. He's so eager to see Todoroki again that it overrides most of the potential mental stumbling blocks. Mostly, it helps to know that Todoroki is looking forward to seeing him again, too. Even though the gala isn't until that evening, the day gets started pretty early. A car comes to pick Izuku up from his dorm at 10:30, and shortly after 11 he's being dropped off onto the tarmac of a private runway offshoot at the airport. A gleaming white jet is waiting, and Todoroki along with it, standing at the foot of the air stairs. He waves when Izuku gets out of the car, and Izuku beelines for him, hitching his backpack up around his shoulders excitedly. He still can't really believe he gets to fly on Todoroki's private plane. After you, Todoroki tells him, and Izuku books it up the air stairs and steps into the very height of luxury transportation. Whoa, he breathes, taking in the interior, a sleek, futuristic space that mixes dark wooden furniture with stark white and black accents, to exude a feeling of class over opulence. There's literal couches in there, and separate rooms, and a dining area. He's never even been on a normal plane, let alone one that puts any other first-class cabin to shame. He'd heard about pro-hero transportation and how fancy some of them tended to fly, but actually seeing it with his own eyes is beyond cool. Can I take pictures? Izuku asks. Go for it, Todoroki says, coming up the stairs behind him. I know it's slightly over the top, but it does make traveling for work much more bearable. Can't argue with that. Someone says, and Izuku pauses with his phone poised to snap a photo right as two more people emerge from one of the little lounge areas. He gasps loudly and claps a hand over his mouth. Pro heroes Uravity and Cellophane wave at them cheerfully. Izuku stares at them both and does not wave back, because he's far too busy freaking out internally to move or respond. Seriously, as long as you keep letting us fly with you, I promise we won't make fun of your swanky ass plane, Zero says. He turns his always-on grin towards Izuku. Yo, I'm Zero. Nice to meet you. I'm Ochako, Uraraka says, and oh my gosh, she is even happier and cuter in person than she looks on TV. You're Midoriya Izuku, right? Izuku can only make some kind of wheezing noise in response to their entirely unnecessary introductions. Sorry, I forgot to warn you, Todoroki says. Ochako and Hanta are flying with us to Hokkaido because they're both freeloaders. Zero puts a hand over his heart. Wow, we're just trying to make sure you have company, and this is the thanks we get. Uraraka claps her hands together, saving time and money. Thanks again, Todoroki-kun. Todoroki shakes his head fondly. Anyway, yes, this is Midoriya-kun. It is such an honor to meet both of you, Izuku says in a rush, bowing frantically, before jabbing Todoroki in the ribs. The hero jerks in surprise and rubs at his side, staring at Izuku in shock. You didn't actually forget to warn me, you just wanted to watch me lose it. Todoroki scratches his chin. Admit it. Oh, he isn't afraid to call Todoroki out at all. Uraraka says, I like him already. Izuku blushes, but doesn't deny it. He is getting pretty good at figuring out when Todoroki's expressionless face is carefully hiding his mischievous gremlin scheming. Fortunately, his schemes tend to be good-natured, as far as Izuku is concerned, and this time he appears to be mostly interested in surprising Izuku with a hangout involving two of his favorite heroes. Aboard a private jet on their way to a high-profile event where Izuku will undoubtedly get to meet even more. Geez, how is this even Izuku's real life anymore? He barely has time to wonder, because Uraraka and Zero are the polar opposite of Todoroki. They're both non-stop talkers, with sharp senses of humor, something Izuku has witnessed in plenty of interviews of the two of them. It's a lot more like being caught up in a whirlwind when most of it is directed right at him, though. He's already pretty overstimulated by just being on a plane for the first time in his life. That's a window, Todoroki tells him as the engine starts to whir louder outside the cabin. You can adjust the transparency from that panel. Izuku slides his fingers over the glossy touch screen Todoroki has indicated, and the black glass wall next to him shimmers and melts from completely darkened to fully transparent. So cool. He can see outside the plane now as they taxi down the runway. And then they're tilting, and he presses his face to the glass, momentarily forgetting his nervousness about getting it dirty and his excitement as the ground drops away underneath them. A soothing voice announces over the cabin speakers that the flight will be about an hour and a half. Zero stretches with a satisfied sigh. This is the life. Todoroki, remind me to repay the favor when I finally break into the top 20 pros, like 15 years from now. He wipes a fake tear from his eye and Uraraka laughs. That can't be more than 4 years away, though, Izuku says, without thinking. All three of them look at him. Zero grins. Oh, man, you don't have to try and make me feel better. I'm not actually bothered by it, we just like to get on his case. I'm the easiest target when Bakugo's not here, Todoroki says. Exactly. Oh, Izuku says. Sorry, right. You probably have the numbers already. He doesn't want Zero to think he's being nosy. What numbers? Zero asks. Just the trajectory numbers, Izuku says. For your hero rank. Zero laughs out loud. Oh, those. Forget it, I'm barely in the top 50. My agency isn't going to waste resources on hiring an analyst for me. Is it really costly? Izuku asks. He had no idea. It's super expensive. Uraraka says. I've actually taken some courses for calculating it, so I can kind of do my own, but... She scrunches up her face in displeasure. There's so many variables. I just don't even bother, Zero says, waving a hand. Well, Izuku says, nervously. Should he tell them? You've done it, haven't you? Todoroki asks. He's doing that sideways glance thing, at Izuku. Zero and Uraraka look between the two of them. Done what? Uraraka asks. IG got curious. Izuku says. So, I may have figured out the rank trajectory for. Todoroki sends graduating class. The others gape at him. What? Zero finally says. Our whole class. Uraraka asks incredulously. Why, it was fun. Izuku offers. He's met with blank stares. I can show you, actually. He grabs his backpack by his feet and pulls out a notebook and pencil. About 20 minutes later, the tea table near them is covered in little pastries, steaming mugs of tea, and sheafs of notepaper with Izuku's equations littered all over them. The four of them pore over the notes. Top 20 by next fall. Uraraka says delightedly. That's way faster than I thought. It's all my best guesswork, pretty much. Izuku says hesitantly. But I really think you could do it, Uraraka-san. Especially if you win tonight for most popular, which I'm pretty sure you will. Izuku-kun. Uraraka says, shocked. There's just no way, the other nominees are. There's really no point in arguing with him, Todoroki says distractedly. He's comparing two stats sheets, looking back and forth between them with his brow furrowed. I've had to sit through meetings about this stuff. It's always guesswork. But these look like very good guesses. Todoroki, Shiro says, very seriously, you gotta share with the rest of us. You can't snatch Midoriya up and hog him all to yourself once he graduates. This statement startles Izuku so much he knocks his pencil off the table. He dives down to retrieve it, cheeks blazing red. He's not a vending machine item, Todoroki's voice says from somewhere above him. Besides, he's going to have lots of opportunities. He'll be able to choose whatever interests him most. Izuku doesn't reemerge immediately after locating his dropped pencil. He knows his thoughts must show on his face and he's too embarrassed to let the others see. He desperately wants to ask Todoroki what he means. Is it something he's thought about, too? Could Izuku apply to work at Todoroki's agency that easily, even without a quirk? Or is Todoroki trying to let him down gently, guide him away from the possibility? Or maybe this, like the trajectories he's just calculated, is all conjecture anyway. Midoriya. Realizing too late that he started mumbling, Izuku quickly tries to straighten up, and bumps the top of his head on the underside of the table. He yelps, "Are you okay?" Todoroki asks. "I'm fine," Izuku says. Maybe the bump on the head will cover up why he looks like such a deer in headlights, all of a sudden. He hopes, anyway. Todoroki-san, the bathroom. That last door toward the back of the cabin, Todoroki directs him. "Thanks," Izuku says, scurrying away quickly. He sighs as he locks the door behind himself. He doesn't have to use the bathroom, he just needed a place to regain his composure. The last thing he wanted tonight was for all his expectations and questions and uncertainties to get in the way of just enjoying things. He splashes his face with cold water vigorously. This gala is the pinnacle of coolest things he will ever do in his life, and he doesn't want to let his brain ruin the event, or the time he actually gets to spend with Todoroki. Izuku chews on his lip. It's felt for a while like things have been building up to this weekend. All the phone calls, the time they've spent together. After this, what happens? Todoroki is immeasurably busy, with things and people all far more important than Izuku. He can't continue indefinitely making time for Izuku like he has been, and Izuku would never expect him to. But he also can't help but wonder how often he'll see Todoroki after the gala is over and done with. Lost in thought, he bites down on his lip too hard, nearly breaking the skin. Oh, he winces, seeking the sore spot tenderly. The image of Todoroki appears in his mind unbidden. Seeking his lips as he watches Izuku talk, and his friend's voice in his head reminds him, he seems very focused. His mom's voice comes next, a knowing smile and an even more knowing, "He likes you." And then, a memory of Izuku's name in that voice, right in his ear. Todoroki murmuring, "Izuku." Okay. Izuku yelps frantically, cranking on the cold water again. There's a shower in here, maybe he should just dunk his whole head under. No, that would definitely look suspicious when he comes out. He wets his face again and then dries it with one of the fluffy hand towels. "I am calm," he tells his reflection in the mirror. "I am totally cool and I am not thinking about kissing Todoroki." Wait, what? Why is he thinking about kissing Todoroki? The soothing voice that announced their takeoff filters over speakers in the bathroom and he nearly jumps out of his skin. "We may be experiencing some slight turbulence. We would like to ask all passengers to please take their seats." He's just gonna have to pull it together. He pats his cheeks and unlocks the door, heading back to where the others are sitting. Right as he passes by Todoroki, the whole plane hits a pocket of rough air, lurching unexpectedly and completely unbalancing Izuku. He flails, but before he can fall flat on his ass and injure himself a second time, Todoroki shoots a hand out and grabs him around the waist. Izuku topples over with a squeak and finds himself suddenly seated very securely in Todoroki's lap. Well, there goes any last hope of staying calm. "Oh," Shiro says, eyebrows raised at them. "Rescue of the year." Uraraka giggles. "Thank you, I'm so sorry, thank you," Izuku says shrilly. "Oh no," Todoroki is so warm, and also so much bigger, looking down at Izuku with an arm still wrapped around his waist. Any heat Izuku had managed to dissipate from his face with all the cold water splashing has immediately rushed back in. His cheeks feel molten hot. "Sorry, you don't have to apologize," Todoroki says. "I do, though," Izuku thinks hopelessly, but Todoroki doesn't know that, because he is unaware of how carefully Izuku is mentally filing away every detail regarding the entire experience of Todoroki Shouto's warm lap. Todoroki helps him scoot over to sit on the sofa next to him, just as the plane rolls again. It's a bit dizzying, and makes Izuku's stomach swoop strangely, though not as much as literally falling into Todoroki's lap had. "Izuku-kun, do you want some water?" Uraraka asks kindly. "He looks kinda pale, Shouto." "This is pretty routine turbulence," Todoroki explains, perhaps mistaking Izuku's mortified silence for nerves. Uraraka hands Todoroki a glass of ice water that he passes to Izuku. "We'll be landing soon." Izuku nods, not daring to look at him, but the conversation between Todoroki and his friends resumes quickly enough, without anyone dwelling on the weirdness of the moment. Todoroki reclines back against the couch, stretching his arm over the backrest behind Izuku. The next time the plane judders, causing Izuku to jump, he feels a gentle hand ruffle his hair briefly. Todoroki scoots over slightly so their legs are almost touching, and Izuku glances at him. But the hero is still engrossed in talking to Shiro and Uraraka about what some of their classmates have been up to recently. It's not wholly unexpected, since Todoroki has always seemed more willing to look past his awkwardness than most people. Still, it helps Izuku to relax, and before too long he's staring out the plane windows at Hokkaido below them as they come in for their landing. They part ways with the other two heroes as they all head to their respective hotels to get ready for the evening. It takes some time to get to where Todoroki and Izuku will be staying by car, and they pass the drive discussing who will be in attendance, and who might win some of the awards that year. Izuku can barely keep his jaw from dropping as they pull up through the impressive entryway of the hotel. It looks even more beautiful than it did in the pictures, a luxury Ryokan-style resort with a modern touch, tranquil even amidst the bustle of the city. The staff is expecting them, and they don't even have to check in at the concierge. Instead, they are discreetly taken up to their rooms on the uppermost floors, where Todoroki has booked 2 suites for their overnight stay. There is, apparently, personal concierge service on offer, as well as a butler, though Izuku can't imagine what he might possibly need a butler for. And Todoroki reassures him before he heads to his own room. If Izuku needs anything, he's right down the hall. They'll be reconvening again at 4:30 in just a couple hours, so Izuku thinks he will be able to manage that long on his own. He ends up wasting a fair amount of time documenting everything about the room as soon as the staff have departed. The bed is enormous and soft when he faceplants directly into it. The windows have an incredible view, looking out over the whole city towards the distant mountain range. The bathroom is similarly stunning, with a full sunken tub that he desperately wants to try. He sends about 24 pictures to his mom, which she exclaims very satisfactorily over, before he gets interrupted by a knock on the door. "Hello, Midoriya-kun." Eiko greets him when he opens it, to admit her and what seems to be a small army of stylists. "Shouto told you we were coming, right?" "Ah, yes," Izuku says. His flushed face and permanently surprised expression probably give off the impression that he was not expecting this. He was, it's just that he forgot, in all his excitement over the suite. "Come in." Eiko introduces him to the stylist team, and barely has he said hello to everyone that they start pushing their hands into his hair, and turning his head this way and that. "I'm going to check on Shouto now," Eiko tells him cheerfully, as he is dragged away to his fashionable fate. "You're in good hands, Midoriya-kun." As it turns out, he is in very good hands. In addition to all the experts who make sure Todoroki is always field ready, he has an extremely capable team working behind the scenes to ensure he's always camera ready for events like these, as well. This, Izuku suspects, is more Eiko's doing than Todoroki himself, but he's certainly the last person to complain, given the incredibly vast array of Todoroki pictures he's saved to his phone and various computer folders over the years. And now, they're hellbent on turning that same expertise on him. They end up washing his hair again so they can style it properly, blow-drying it after putting some fancy, nice-smelling product in it to make it manageable instead of messy. Somehow, they get his bangs to fall to the side a little bit, half off his forehead. It makes his hair look more deliberately rumpled as opposed to wildly untamable. No. One of them, the woman who seems to be in charge of the team, says, right before another can start dabbing some kind of beige, skin-colored cream on Izuku's cheeks. Eiko-sen said nothing on his face. The other one clcks her tongue. "He's so pale, though." "He's fine," says the first, waving her hand. "Todoroki-sen likes all these freckles." Izuku gapes at her. Did he say that? "That's what Eiko said," the woman tells him, and if it comes from her, that means he as good as said it. Izuku rubs his cheeks hard. She smacks his hand away. "You're going to make your face blotchy." He really doesn't know what to do with the new information he's been given, and now that his hair is done he's pretty much good to go. All that's left is to change into his suit, which has been freshly pressed and delivered to his room personally. They wait until Izuku has gotten dressed to make sure everything still fits correctly. The gray suit is still perfect, and after helping him with his tie and smoothing everything into place, he's finally ready. "Thanks," he tells the team breathlessly, and they all give him encouraging nods. Right on cue, there's a knock on the door. As everyone starts to bustle around cleaning up their styling tools, Izuku hurries to answer it. It's 4:30 on the nose. He pulls it open. He's struck absolutely speechless. Todoroki stands waiting at his door. He took the words to heart when Izuku had suggested he wear something dark-colored. His suit is full black on black, black-fitted shirt under an ink dark vest, black tie. His coat, also black, is sleekly aligned with his torso to show off his distractingly strong shoulders. The pants are so dark yet so shiny, possessing a rich LC curve that only serves to highlight how nice Todoroki's legs are, long, powerful like the rest of him. Against the pale skin of his throat, his wrists, with his hair swept off his forehead, the suit makes him look more than just mature. He looks darkly enigmatic, like a handsome vampire from a movie or something. Like if Izuku let himself, Todoroki could steal him away and he'd be lost forever. Izuku is sure he'd never want to come back. "Wow," Izuku whispers, accidentally out loud. Yeah, Todoroki mumbles back, which seems odd, until Izuku tears his eyes away from Todoroki's everything and looks at his face and realizes Todoroki is staring at him in return. Oh, Izuku says, and Todoroki's gaze jerks upwards to meet his. He looks as surprised as Izuku feels. Hi, Todoroki says. Hi, Izuku responds. Todoroki starts to say, waving his hand vaguely above his head. You did something to your hair. Yeah, Izuku says, before shaking his head rapidly, because he in fact did nothing. I mean, your stylist did. They brushed it. Oh, Todoroki says. It looks good. Really? Izuku asks. Yeah. Good, Izuku stammers, before realizing how arrogant that sounds. You, also. Your hair looks good. Not just your hair. All of you. It looks good. Thank you, Todoroki says. Izuku puts a hand over his face. I mean, the suit. All of Todoroki does look very, very good. But how weird does that sound? You recommended it, Todoroki reminds him. I did, Izuku says. He feels very buoyant, suddenly, and can't help but giggle. It does come out somewhat hysterical, but he's just, this is surreal. Good job, me. He might be imagining it, but he thinks Todoroki gives him another quick once-over. Eyes fell seeking down and then back up again. Good job on a lot of things. Izuku laughs nervously again. Tea time to go. Todoroki nods. If we don't want to be late. It takes about an hour to get to the venue where the gala is being held. The event doesn't officially start until 6. But there's one more important thing to do before it gets in full swing. They pull up to the curb, and as people hurry to open the car doors for them, Todoroki says, you don't have to smile if you don't want to, just wave. And ignore all the yelling. Oh, and don't look directly into the flashes. Wait, can you repeat? Izuku starts to say, but then the car doors are opening, and he feels like Present Mike is shouting directly in his face, which, actually, is almost exactly what's happening. There he is, everyone's favorite, smoking hot and dashingly cool hero, Shouto. And who's that with him? The amount of camera flashes that pop off in Izuku's face blind him almost instantly. He stumbles getting out of the car, but a big, steady hand splays warm at the small of his back, making sure he doesn't fall. I know it's the worst, Todoroki mutters to him under his breath. Actually, Izuku has gone to a lot of events like these, one of the many, many faces lining the red carpet past the roped-off barriers and security guards. He's just never been the one the cameras are pointed at. Still, he grins at Todoroki, or at least tries to. There's still so many spots swimming in front of his eyes he can't actually tell if he's even looking at the hero. People are just really excited to see you, he says. I know how that is. There are tons of people in the crowd wearing Shouto merchandise, waving signs, trying to get his attention. A lot of people are pointing at Izuku. Shouto waves at them, and they get stopped for pictures and questions a couple times. Todoroki gets complimented on his choice of attire, which he seems oddly appreciative about. Thanks, he tells the reporter. Midoriya recommended the suit. Izuku nearly chokes on his tongue. Not exactly. Todoroki ignores his protests, conveniently spotting something to point out in the crowd. Midoriya, look, he says. Izuku follows the line of his arm and sees what he's pointing at. There are 2 girls in the crowd, both waving and yelling something. They're wearing Shouto gear, but when Izuku looks their way, they both start waving wildly. Izuku has no idea what's going on, until Todoroki says, they're fans of yours, so you should wave back. Izuku blinks, uncomprehending. They're what now? He raises his hand and gives them a tiny wave, and a hesitant smile. They both start jumping up and down, squeezing each other's hands in excitement. Izuku thinks they might be screaming, and then he realizes they are. They're shouting something about autographs. One of them holds up her Shouto poster in a pen. Me? Izuku asks, pointing at himself. Todoroki pushes him forward. On wobbly legs, he meets them at the velvet ropes. Most people don't pay him that much attention, still trying to get pictures of Todoroki, but Izuku signs his name as neatly as he can, with a hastily added thank you for saying hi. You're our hero. One of the girls tells him, and he reflexively hides behind his hands in shock, which in turn makes her also cover her face in embarrassment. Thank you, he says, as he's hurried along by staff, who are already shepherding Todoroki towards some of the interviewers, before they get inside the venue. Well, someone says as they draw near, and Izuku recognizes the very familiar face of Chargeable, who gets nearly as many gigs as a celebrity host with his electrifying personality, as he does hero work. Look who it is. He's disarmingly magnetic in person, grin 1,000,000 watts, so bright it nearly makes Izuku overlook the mic in his hand, and the cameras following his every move. But Todoroki appears completely at ease with him, which makes it easier for Izuku to relax. How have you been, Kaminari? Todoroki asks. Oh, the usual, Kaminari says, pretty awesome. Glad you could grace us with your presence this evening. And happy to have you back in Japan. You freaked us all out pretty good. You holding up okay after that? Izuku vaguely recognizes the flow of an interview question, but it's casual, and Todoroki doesn't seem put off by it. Kaminari is good at what he does, especially at an event like this, where he knows so many of the attendees. He makes every interview seem like a conversation between 2 friends just catching up. Todoroki talks a bit about his speedy recovery following his recent injury, reassuring Kaminari that he's doing just fine. Kaminari does seem genuinely relieved to hear it, although he must have already known most of the details, given their class network. Well, so glad you made it tonight. And, oh, I can't help but notice. Not alone. Content just to listen. Izuku startles when attention suddenly shifts to him. He bows and waves at the camera. Hello. Kaminari grins and turns to Todoroki. He really doesn't need it at this point, but gonna introduce us. Todoroki does that thing again, settles his hand at the base of Izuku's spine, a little protective and very calming. This is Midoriya Izuku. My. He looks down as Izuku glances up at him, wondering why he paused. He's my guest. Midoriya-kun, Kaminari says, how are you enjoying the evening so far? Izuku leans into the mic when it's thrust toward him. Oh, it's amazing. I'm super excited to be here. How about yourself? This makes Kaminari laugh. I'm having a pretty good time. Thanks for asking. This is why everyone keeps saying he's more polite than me, Todoroki comments. To be fair, that's not hard to achieve, Kaminari says, his grin getting wider when Todoroki shakes his head. Conspiratorially, right underneath the nose of Todoroki's impassive stare, he tells Izuku, you know this guy has never brought anybody to one of these events before, right? Like, ever. This is something Izuku knows, because what doesn't he know about Todoroki, but somehow he hasn't thought of tonight in those terms. He says, not sure what exactly he's supposed to say to this. I feel very lucky to be here tonight. I'm sure you're not the only one, Kaminari says. Thanks so much for your time, you too. I'll catch up with you later, enjoy the rest of the evening. Interview completed, they're funneled on through, finally stepping into the main doors to the hall itself. Inside, the atmosphere is lively, but less frantic. Music drifts throughout the venue from a live band, and the floor is packed with people mingling and talking. Everywhere Izuku looks, he spots familiar faces, heroes he thought he'd only ever see up close through his computer monitor. Now he's in the same room as all of them, at once. It's incredible. But the most amazing thing to happen yet, probably, is when Todoroki leans closer to say quietly, Kaminari was right, actually. About what? Izuku asks, standing on his tiptoes to catch a glimpse of someone he thinks might have been Lemillion. I feel pretty damn lucky that you're here tonight, too. Izuku spins around to look at him. Todoroki just smiles, before looking away, across the hall. Wanna check out the food? He asks, as though he hasn't just rocked Izuku's world, once again. Food does sound good, and Izuku would follow Todoroki pretty much anywhere. So he says, lead the way. He feels like he's walking on air, all of his earlier worries suddenly seeming pointless. The night is just getting started, and whatever happens after is a million miles away, like the ground seen from the windows of an airplane. The first half of the gala is something of a blur to Izuku. There are a lot of important, impeccably dressed people that keep stopping Todoroki to talk, even if he doesn't always seem like he wants to. Fortunately, they also keep bumping into a lot of interesting heroes that Todoroki knows, for Izuku to ogle disbelievingly. He's never dreamed he would get to be in a room with this many pros at the same time. Todoroki continues to make sure Izuku is included in the conversations, despite how surprised most people seem to be meeting some young, nameless college kid at such a prestigious event. They warm up to him once they realize he's the one who saved all the children in the university villain encounter. He's not expecting so many people to recognize him, but more than just a few take the time to commend Izuku for what happened that day, until he's fairly overwhelmed by praise from all the heroes he's admired and looked up to for so long. Despite his awkwardness, Izuku finds every conversation immensely interesting, and he's content to listen in and file away as much information as he can. Todoroki, on the other hand, looks more and more fatigued after each encounter. Do you want me to get you any more food? Izuku asks him after what seems to be a particularly draining conversation with a prominent politician. Or a drink, maybe. I could use several drinks, Todoroki mutters, and then shakes his head when Izuku laughs. No, I'm fine. Sorry, this must be so damn boring for you. I swear I didn't invite you just for you to get stuck listening to a bunch of people drone on and on. It's not boring, actually, Izuku reassures him. Besides, I know it's all stuff you're obligated to do. Or something. The perks of being a hero, Todoroki says. Some of my friends are great at these events, but Izuku nudges him in the side with his elbow. I think you're doing great, too. Todoroki looks surprised, so Izuku just smiles at him. He has been doing pretty great. A lot of the conversations with the political and government elite are thinly veiled requests for his public support in various areas. Navigating that minefield is tricky, but Todoroki and his resting blank face pull it off admirably. The award should be about to start soon, Todoroki says. Actually, there is someone I wanted to introduce you to before they do. Me? Izuku asks, following him through the crowd, to one of the tables closest to the stage. There are several very high-ranking pros seated at it, though one man in particular sits with his back toward them, his face not yet visible. It's a thin back, almost skeletal, though the figure in the dark blue suit is very tall. Their hair is on the long side, a bit scraggly, going gray, though it's hard to tell for that startling shade of yellow blonde. Todoroki, Izuku starts to whisper, a strange, breathless panic overtaking him. But Todoroki is already saying very respectfully, Sensei. The man turns, and Izuku stops breathing entirely. Todoroki, my boy, Yagi Tashinori says, his shadowed eyes crinkling up at the corners in happiness, you look remarkably well. I am, Todoroki agrees. He bows to the man sitting next to Yagi. Aizawa-sensei. Don't mind me, Todoroki's other former teacher says, waving a hand tiredly. He looks like he means it. Izuku has never seen all that many pictures or videos of the reclusive underground hero, but even in a sharp black suit with his long hair pulled back, Aizawa appears remarkably exhausted. I wanted to introduce you, Todoroki says, with a nod at Izuku. Izuku barely notices that this is his cue. Internally, he is shrieking. This is like meeting Todoroki's parents. No, worse, because Endeavor may be terrifying, but this is all might. Oh, might. Izuku has one chance, to make a meaningful first impression, and he wasn't even expecting to speak to the man tonight. He wishes Todoroki had warned him so he could mentally prepare, but maybe that would have been a disaster, too, given his tendency to overthink things. What does he say? What does he say? What does he say? Hello, he says, hearing the words come out of his mouth without actually comprehending them. I'm Todoroki's date. Time seems to slow to a near standstill. Dimly, Izuku is still aware of things occurring, Todoroki at the periphery of his vision turning towards him, Yaga's eyebrows raising, Aizawa expressionlessly taking another sip of his drink. It all seems meaningless, just like his existence, now. His words are pinging about in his clearly empty skull, over and over. It's not a date, Mom, how many times do I have to tell you, we're not going on a date. Just, he wheezes, kidding, I didn't mean, a date like a social engagement, Todoroki didn't. I mean, we're not, I don't know why I said that, probably because I'm so, freaking out, right now, but I'm just his guest, this is just a normal, totally normal gala and I'm just here to be Todoroki's friend. I mean, guest, and I am so sorry, does anyone want another drink? Some of those shrimp CCK tail things. I can. It's okay, Midoriya, Todoroki says, and Izuku snaps his mouth shut. Yagi and Aizawa are still staring at him. So, Aizawa says at length, he does have a name besides Todoroki's date, then. Izuku stares numbly into space at a point somewhere above Aizawa's ear, and, even though his name is no longer worth mentioning, mumbles, why yes. It's Midoriya Izuku, Yagi says kindly. Izuku flounders soundlessly, like a fish left out of water for far too long. All Might said his full name, All Might knows his name. Yes, Yaga's eyes crinkle again. His face is honestly kind of terrifying, Izuku has to admit, but also somehow very kind. He hasn't seen much of All Might up close after his decline, years ago. After the horrible fight with All For One, a villain most of the rest of the world hadn't even realized existed until that night. Maybe the heroes had wanted to keep All Might's memory, his legacy, as close to intact as they could. Izuku feels a very pronounced sadness over this. Not that Yagi has waned in the way that he has, because all people do, even heroes. But standing in front of him now, Izuku doesn't feel the slightest bit different about the man he's wanted to be like all his life. Even gone around the edges, All Might's smile is real. I was hoping I'd see you here, tonight, Yagi says. Me? Izuku asks. He knows All Might doesn't lie, but how is he supposed to believe that? But Yagi laughs. Of course. Imagine my surprise when I heard you say I was your favorite hero. I felt very well represented. You saw that interview. Izuku gasps. The thought is vaguely horrifying. He'd been himself in it. I was very curious about you, I'll admit, Yagi says. Shouto was so taken with you that I had to. Sensei, Todoroki hurriedly interrupts, and Yaga's smile widens as Izuku swivels his head back and forth between them. Sorry, Yagi says, just an old man rambling. Mostly, what I wanted to tell you tonight is thank you. Izuku shakes his head, shocked. For what? For putting yourself in danger to save others, Yagi says. Including the life of one of my former students. But that was. Izuku swallows. I was just in the right place at the right time. That's all it ever is, for the most part, Yagi says. No, it's really thanks to you, and Shouto, too. And other, real heroes. Izuku clasps his hands together nervously. He doesn't know how to accept this, thanks from someone who has done so much, when Izuku has done so little. Yaga's brow furrows, and Izuku wonders if he's said something wrong. I don't understand, the man says. I wasn't there. That day. You were alone, when you did what you did. I know, but I was able to do it, because of everything I've learned about you, because of you. Izuku explains. That's why I admire you so much. You inspire people to do that kind of thing, even someone like me. My boy, that's not how it works. If it hadn't been for you, young Midoriya. Yagi says, his voice suddenly more forceful, enough that Izuku can't help but listen. Believe me when I tell you, even if you'd never heard of me, you would still have found a way to do what you did. Izuku worries the bottom of his suit jacket will be irreversibly crumpled with how hard he's clutching it. He's always believed in All Might, all his life. So why is this time so difficult? How? Do you know that? No one, not even I, could ever make someone else a hero, Yagi says, with complete certainty. The only way for any of us to become one is through our own actions. Speechless, Izuku stares at him. His eyes feel hot, and go blurry a moment later. All Might just called him a hero. The lights dim, and an announcement for people to begin taking their seats for the awards portion of the evening is made. Thanks, Sensei, Todoroki says. He puts a warm hand across Izuku's back again, as much to steady him as to get him moving. Izuku swipes at his eyes, and bows to Yagi and Aizawa as deeply as he can without looking ridiculous. Thank you for everything, he says. He doesn't know what else he could say that would ever be adequate. I am honored to have been your hero, my boy, Yagi tells him. Izuku dares to look him right in the eye. You're still my favorite hero. Taken aback by the force behind his words, Yagi laughs, before glancing at Todoroki. I do wonder how long that will last. Izuku starts to ask, but the lights dim again, and they've got to get to their table before they wind up stranded. Izuku sits in his seat numbly. Present Mike has already bounded onto the stage to the podium, but Izuku barely hears what he's shouting. He's still working out what just happened, even just the fact that he got to talk to All Might is almost too great to comprehend, never mind the fact that All Might believes in him, somehow. Despite everything people have said, despite even what Todoroki has said, Izuku can't quite buy into his own hype. He can acknowledge that he made a difference, and he realizes he saved Todoroki's life, and the schoolgirl, Hana. For that, he's especially grateful. But since then, it's felt like people are trying to insist that Izuku is something he's not. He's never felt like a hero, just a scared boy who stumbled his way into a lucky solution. The most nerve-wracking part of this is that it makes him feel like all Todoroki's reassurances and time and friendship are the result of something with no real basis. When he's at his most anxious, it still makes him feel like he's tricking Todoroki, somehow, and that at any moment, Todoroki will realize it too, and Izuku will no longer be worth his attention. But All Might is the hero, the greatest hero who ever lived. He knows what it means to be one, and Izuku has never doubted him before. There's something in what he said that feels different. Izuku had even talked about it himself, when he'd recalled Todoroki shielding them without a quirk to defend himself. It wasn't about the situation or the stakes, but the choice. Are you okay? Izuku jumps slightly, broken out of his daze. He turns to look, and there's Todoroki, leaning in close with a frown. It's dark, hopefully too dark to see that Izuku is crying, but not quite dark enough that Izuku can't see the concern in his eyes, light and dark, illuminated by the reflection from the lights on the stage. And suddenly, he realizes that Todoroki doesn't just see a kid with skinny wrists and watery eyes and no quirk to speak of, a fleeting media sensation, with nothing else remotely remarkable about him. Todoroki doesn't see everything Izuku isn't, or can't be. He sees everything Izuku aspires to be. He sees a hero in him. Todoroki always looks at Izuku as though Izuku is something he's never seen before. Izuku realizes his hands are shaking and clenches them together in his lap. They're announcing the first award category, Rescue of the Year, already, and Todoroki is supposed to be paying attention to that, not him. I'm okay, Izuku says, smiling at Todoroki to show he means it. He's so okay that it kind of hurts. I'm really good. Todoroki nods and then, tentatively, lowers his hand over both of Izuku's. He does it softly, the warmth of his palm settling in hesitant degrees, like he's afraid if he moves too swift or too sudden, the spell will be broken, and Izuku will be gone. Izuku stares down at their hands, too, stunned to speak once again. Todoroki's hand is heavy over his, and his fingers are long and slender. He can easily cover both of Izuku's hands with one of his own. He squeezes, and the weight and pressure makes the trembling of Izuku's fingers start to subside. If you're my date, Todoroki murmurs, is it alright to hold your hand? Izuku bites his lip as he feels laughter bubbling up inside him. Geez, Todoroki-san, he whispers back. I panicked. I know, Todoroki says. You knew I would. I did. I'm sorry. Izuku exhales slowly. He turns his hand upwards, so that his palm is pressed to Todoroki's. It's alright with me. If it's alright with you. Todoroki smiles a tiny smile of his own and keeps his hand resting over Izuku's, as Present Mike checks the results. Rescue of the Year goes to. A pause for dramatic effect. Shouto. The room bursts into applause and Izuku gasps so hard he almost chokes. Ecstatic, he literally pops up onto his feet, wriggling his hand free from Todoroki's to clap with everyone else, before realizing that Todoroki isn't moving. He seems to just be opting for sitting there looking surprised and mildly baffled. Todoroki-san. Izuku squeals, pulling on his arm to get him to stand. You have to go accept the award. He decides to only say I told you so in his head, because he's too happy to really try and hold it over Todoroki. He watches Todoroki take the stage, can't help but admire how drop-dead gorgeous he looks under the lights. Truly a job well done, Izuku thinks proudly. If all his accumulation of fanboy knowledge results in nothing beyond that suit, he'll still be happy. Todoroki leans into the mic and clears his throat. Izuku can tell he feels awkward. He's known Todoroki's body language well even before spending so much time with him in person. But the straight-backed way he's standing and emotionless expression give it away immediately. This is really surprising, Todoroki says, in his most deadpan voice, and the whole audience laughs. It makes him snort, too, and he smiles a bit, reluctantly, at first, before his eyes FLCK over to where Izuku is sitting. Izuku gives him the tiniest of waves and a thumbs up, and Todoroki's shoulders relax a fraction. Actually, I was convinced I wouldn't be winning anything tonight. But then a friend talked some sense into me, so I do have something planned out to say. He clears his throat, before continuing. He thanks All Might and his old teachers, the group that works for him at his hero agency, the organizers of the gala and awards ceremony. He thanks Endeavor, too, very belatedly. Izuku will ask him later if he really almost forgot or if that was intentional. He mentions how he never really would have been able to anticipate winning something like this during his years at Yui, and that he's glad to have been given the opportunity. He's nearing the wrap-up point, when he pauses to say one last thing. I realize I've said more than most people have ever heard me talk in one go, so I swear I'm almost done. More laughs from the crowd follow this statement, and Todoroki finds Izuku among them one more time. I do need to talk about Midoriya Izuku. Izuku, who has been watching him fondly with his chin propped on his hand, nearly slams his face into the table when his elbow slips off the edge as he startles in surprise. Midoriya, this would have been a posthumous award if you hadn't been there. This startles even more laughs out of everyone as Izuku puts a hand over his face. He cannot believe Todoroki would joke about that now. But you did, and because of that I'm here. And I'm glad that I won tonight, so I could prove you right. I can gratefully accept this because of you, and I wanted to win it for you, as a thank you for saving me, and for believing in me since the start. He steps back from the mic and bows, as Izuku proceeds to have a mini heart attack. He wants to cover his bright red face, but he also can't take his eyes off Todoroki as the hero jogs down the stairs probably a little faster than is necessary. Izuku stares at him with wide eyes up until he drops back down into his seat at the table, looking very relieved to have that over with. He looks at Izuku, who instantly looks away with a squeak. Then, worried that that's too rude, he tears his gaze back. Todoroki is watching him. I embarrassed you, Todoroki says, very quietly. Yeah, Izuku whispers. I wasn't expecting that. I needed to say it, Todoroki says. I'm not sure that's true, Izuku says. But I still liked your speech. Really, Izuku says. He hesitates, before turning his hand palm up, on his lap. He's not even sure Todoroki is looking. A second later, Todoroki takes his hand again. The awards are extremely fun to watch. Uravity does end up grabbing the award for most popular, while Ground Zero very proudly brings home the high honor of Hero Performance of the Year. Many of Todoroki's classmates are nominated or winners in their categories. Izuku is very satisfied to see most of his predictions for the winners come true. There's also the fact that he gets to hold Todoroki's hand the entire duration of the awards ceremony. He's not sure what he's going to tell his mom after this. Is it really a date, then, even if he's the one who accidentally called it that first? Todoroki didn't disagree. Also, he seems to want to hold Izuku's nervous, sweaty hands. Besides being an act of martyrdom in and of itself, that's a whole new level of closeness between them that Todoroki was willing to initiate. Izuku can't really think about these details for too long without feeling like he's going to spontaneously combust, so he tries to focus very hard on the awards being presented. It can't last forever though, and eventually Present Mike is screaming out a last thank you and goodnight, before the lights come back up and the band begins to play again. The audience still lingers to talk and congratulate the winners, and more people come up to chat with Todoroki Shouto. Zero calls as he sweeps by on his way out. See you at the after party. Maybe, Todoroki says. Oh, come on. After party? Izuku asks, peering at Todoroki curiously. Yeah, my old class has one every year, Todoroki explains. But we don't have to go if that's not. I can too, Izuku demands. Yes, guests are invited, Todoroki says, blinking at his fervor. Do you want? Izuku grabs his arm. Todoroki-san. Your class, Yui's most promising generation. Okay. Todoroki agrees, as Izuku shakes him with a manic passion. Right, I should have expected that, I guess. Yes, Izuku yelps, punching the air in his excitement. This is the best night of my life. The Yui class after party is at a fancy hotel nearby, but apparently not heavily publicized or open to press. They've reserved the penthouse for the evening, a beautiful sprawling space that is already rambunctiously loud by the time Todoroki and Izuku turn up. Several people shout out to them when they walk in, drinks raised in greeting. It's a good thing Izuku already met All Might earlier in the evening, because by now, his breaking point has been reached. If it hadn't, he thinks the sheer combined presence of the people in this room would have knocked him unconscious. Izuku-kun. Uraraka calls over the heads of her former classmates. She holds up her statuette, pointing to it animatedly. You were right. Izuku waves back, thrilled to even be acknowledged by anyone. He's barely thought this when a second later someone is slinging an arm over his shoulders affably. Glad you guys made it, Shiro says, his grin as wide as ever. Todoroki, you decided not to go into old man mode, huh? Loudly, he whispers to Izuku, when we were still in school he used to go to bed before 9, like, every night. So responsible, Todoroki-san. Izuku exclaims. Shiro sighs. Okay, I'm clearly trying to mock you in front of the wrong demographic here. I always come to our class parties, Todoroki says mildly, unbothered by being poked fun at. Yeah, but we weren't sure if you had other plans tonight. Obviously, Shiro says, as Kaminari, joined by the recognizably pink Ashido Mina, strolls up to join them. Kaminari wiggles his eyebrows at Izuku. Sorry, Midoriya, we didn't hijack your man, did we? My what? Izuku stammers. No, I wanted to come, too. Oh, he's cute and a party animal. Ashido crows, ignoring the fact that Izuku is clearly anything but. He needs a drink. I'll take that, Todoroki says, intercepting the beer she passes to Izuku, who is still a few months shy of the drinking age. Ashido makes disappointed noises as Todoroki drains half of it in one go. Bawa, nobody's gonna care, let him have some fun. I'm having fun, Izuku reassures her. He really is, and even with Japan's practically non-existent underage drinking regulations, he doesn't want to risk getting Todoroki in trouble for letting him loose on the open bar. Not to mention, Izuku is absolutely sure he'd be an embarrassment if he got drunk surrounded by so many of his idols, so it's probably best to play it safe. Kaminari laughs. You're too good to this guy, Midoriya. Don't let him cramp your style. Alright. I won't. Izuku chirps, which makes the other three laugh. We'd all be lost without your guidance, Denki, Todoroki says dryly. Kaminari flashes them the most exaggerated wink Izuku's ever witnessed before he, Mina, and Shiro drift off to chat with some of their other friends. Shouto-kun. Someone calls out excitedly, and more familiar faces hurry to greet them. Two people Izuku recognizes as Todoroki's closest friends from Yuyui, Yaoyorozu Momo and Ada Tenya. For a few moments, Izuku is too starstruck to even introduce himself properly. Like Todoroki, Yaoyorozu and Ada are basically pro-hero royalty. Both of them are as towering as he is and equally as beautiful in their formal wear. Being surrounded by the three of them makes Izuku feel a little bit like a sentient potato, but a very happy potato nonetheless. Ada moves his arms around just as much in real life as he does on TV, and Izuku has a hard time not watching the sharp cuts he makes with his hands as he animatedly congratulates Todoroki on his award. And Midoriya-kun. Ada suddenly blares. I'm delighted to be able to make the acquaintance of one as admirable as yourself. Shouto has spoken very highly of you to us. Ah, me as well, Izuku says, FLC curd. I mean, I can't believe I get to meet you both. I've always thought you're both incredible heroes, and Todoroki-sen has told me so much about you. They both look extremely touched. We were thrilled when Todoroki-sen told us you would be joining him tonight, Yaoyorozu tells him. We've been looking forward to meeting you for so long. Really? Izuku squeaks. He hopes it isn't proving to be a letdown, given he hasn't done much beyond stare at everyone in awe. Oh, yes. Yaoyorozu gushes. It's the first time he's ever been so fond of someone. We wanted to talk to you ourselves, of course, but Achako already told us girls all about you, so I'm just so happy. That's so nice of her. Izuku practically wails. We all think you two look very cute together, Yaoyorozu says, delicately putting her fingers to her mouth as she smiles. Izuku wheezes. How much wine have you had, Momo? Todoroki asks, and then deftly dodges the swat she aims at his arm. This is my first glass, she says indignantly. You're working faster than me, it looks like. Todoroki's response is a very long and defiant drink from his beer. Unlike most of the discussions he'd been dragged into during the gala, Todoroki seems quite content to let his old friends sweep him away into various topics of conversation. They talk about the past year, hero rankings, reminisce on their school days. Izuku hangs on every word, and instead of feeling like an outsider, finds them all eager to share the impressive laundry list of their exploits with him. In fairness, he's a very good audience of one. He's never even heard half these stories, like the quirk apprehension test their very first day of class, or their 2-on-2 hero versus villain fights. Todoroki is also probably the most relaxed Izuku has seen him around other people, besides Eiko, and more recently, Izuku himself. Todoroki does still retain an air of respectfulness around the two of them that he drops entirely with his former classmates, likely out of self-preservation. They're all ruthlessly overfamiliar with him and look for every opportunity to find something to tease him about. It's also probably saying something that he's several beers in. His responses to teasing have become less reserved and more hilarious with every bottle, and his cheeks are a very telling shade of pink. It's kind of unbearably cute, in Izuku's opinion. It's not like that magazine shoot was my first choice, he explains adamantly to Jiru and Takoyami at one point, who are both snickering at his attempts. Izuku has never actually seen Takoyami smile. In any pictures, it's pretty weird seeing him laugh. Aoyama is persuasive, you know that better than anyone. Yes, Takoyami admits, but that is also why I always say I'm busy when he starts proposing his schemes of dark design. Dude, no judgment though, Jiru says innocently. It was a good spread. Shut up, Todoroki says, finishing off his beer. I'm serious. Jiru insists. Midoriya agrees with me, right? Ooh, Izuku says, trapped unexpectedly. The photo shoot in question had basically been a vanity piece for luxury products, featuring several of the hero world's most eligible bachelors. Todoroki had been very handsome in it, and also very inexplicably shirtless, and Izuku has those pictures burned into his brain at this point. Not a question you have to answer, Todoroki says sagely. No, I think he does, Jiru says. But before Izuku can say anything in response, a new challenger approaches. Boy, the shout is loud, and sharp, and pretty unmistakable. Izuku freezes, shoulders hunching up around his ears. Todoroki shakes his head. Here we go, he sighs. Most people in the room literally clear the way as Bakugo Katsuki stomps his way down the center of the room, right toward them. His husband follows behind him at a more leisurely pace, in a full red suit no less. Kirishima grabs Kaminari to hug him and fist bumps Zero as he passes with a brilliant grin. Bakugo doesn't say hello to anyone until he reaches Todoroki and Izuku, where he stops in front of them, sizing them up. Yo, Todoroki says. Half and half, Bakugo barks in return. His distinctive glare is absolutely terrifying up close. Without so much as another word between them, the two top pros go from a stare down to grinning at each other like old friends, which, of course, they are. The FCK is wrong with you. Bakugo asks, like he's asking Todoroki how he's been doing. Trying to get yourself killed abroad without a word to any of us, you damn lunatic. You're right, I should have run it by you first, Todoroki says. Todoroki, Kirishima yells, draping an arm around Todoroki's neck. New rule, you gotta at least be in Japan if you're gonna wind up in the hospital. Don't scare us like that. I wasn't scared, Bakugo says. He's fine, look at him. I was fine, Todoroki confirms, as he accepts another beer from Kirishima. Bakugo and Todoroki have one of the most famous public pro rivalries, stemming from their time at UUE as two of its strongest students since they both set foot on campus. Their similar attitude problems in the early days only served to cement them as two peas in a pod, regardless of the fact that they tended to be at each other's throats. Though they even out into something resembling friendship over the years, the undercurrent of competitiveness is never far below the surface with the two of them. Hang on a sec, Bakugo says, squinting at Izuku. You're the little shit that did that impression of me, aren't you? Oh, crap, Izuku had practically forgotten about that. I might have done that. Yeah, he says. It was on request, though. Bakugo stares at him a moment longer, and Izuku feels himself breaking out into a nervous sweat. Then the explosion hero throws his head back and laughs uproariously. That was pretty good, kid. He cackles, jamming a heavy hand down on Izuku's head to ruffle his hair like a pleased older brother. So much for all the hard work of Izuku's hairstylists. Izuku puts a hand over his racing heart. Oh, thank God, wait, you're not mad. Nah, Bakugo says, a true fan should damn well know my catchphrase. Since when is your catchphrase die, scum? Todoroki asks. That's not my catchphrase, Bakugo says, frowning. His catchphrase is just die, actually. Izuku pipes up. Todoroki stares dully into the distance. I shouldn't be surprised by this, and yet, Bakugo scoffs. Quit actin' all high and mighty, you're just as dramatic. Izuku can't quite stifle the giggle that escapes him, causing Todoroki to fake glare at him instead. Sorry, don't apologize to this asshole. Bakugo snaps sharply. You know he's way more trouble than me, right? He tell you about the time he told the chief of police to go FCK himself. What? Izuku gasps. In language somewhat less uncouth than Bakugo-kun's interpretation, Ada interjects from nearby, where he is eavesdropping, but I can confirm this is true. There was a slight misunderstanding, Todoroki says. You tried to fight him. Bakugo wheezes. Bakugo is unsurprisingly very eager to tell embarrassing stories about Todoroki. It turns out he's heard more about Izuku than he lets on at first, eventually revealing that he knows Izuku went to his old middle school, which leads to the two of them discussing their shared hometown. He's also about as demanding as can be expected, and keeps insisting Izuku show him and Kirishima more hero impressions, which cracks them both up every time. It's only when Bakugo asks to see his pro-hero Shouto impersonation that Izuku realizes Todoroki is actually not standing next to him anymore. He looks around, confused, before finally spotting Todoroki sitting on one of the huge sofas, slightly isolated from all the commotion. I promise I'll show you later, he tells Bakugo, who is becoming slightly belligerent and has now inebriated state. Kirishima ushers him away laughingly, as Izuku makes his way over to where Todoroki is sitting, with his head tilted back, eyes closed. He's undone the top button of his suit shirt, and his collarbones and the smooth column of his throat are exposed. Izuku swallows. Hi, he says, and Todoroki opens his eyes to look at him. His gaze is a bit fuzzy, eyes lidded, and Izuku fights back a smile. Tipsy. I wanted to sit down for a bit and it looked like you were. Fine. Todoroki's shoulders rise and fall in a shrug. Yeah, that was. I can't believe I got to talk to him for so long. Izuku says giddily. He really can't believe it, not just because Ground Zero is another of his favorite heroes, but because he'd never imagined one of the most intimidating pros would even care to talk to him for more than a few seconds at a time, let alone be interested in an actual conversation. He's really not as bad as everyone thinks, Todoroki says. Well, not anymore, anyway. He's another favorite of yours, right? Izuku nods emphatically, and Todoroki gets a funny look, like he wants to frown and knows he shouldn't. Izuku tilts his head, confused at first, as Todoroki glances away and takes another sip of his beer. Is everything okay? I'm not in danger of slipping to third place on your list, am I? Todoroki asks, blinking up at him. Third place on his. Wait, oh my god, is Todoroki actually? You won't, Izuku says. Of course you aren't. Todoroki-sen, you're not, oh or, are you? Drunk. Definitely at least halfway there. But jealous. Izuku doesn't think he can actually voice that aloud. The reality of a world in which Todoroki could be jealous of someone else getting Izuku's attention seems so far off that he can't bring himself to imagine it. But, sorry, Todoroki says abruptly. God, that was a really, never mind, I don't know why I want some company while you're over here. Izuku blurts out. Todoroki's face is considerably redder than before. Is that still just from the alcohol? Yeah, Todoroki says. Please. Izuku smiles. He wonders if he should try to see if Todoroki wants to hold his hand here, too, and if that would make him feel better. Or maybe there's too many of his eagle-eyed friends watching. Izuku is pondering this so intently that he doesn't notice there's a tipped-over bottle on the floor next to the couch until he steps on it, and his feet fly out from under him. Izuku. He's saved, once again, from an embarrassing fate by Todoroki's reflexes. The pro hero grabs him before he can tumble over backwards to the floor, or crack his head on the coffee table. Before Izuku knows what's happening, he finds himself being hauled into Todoroki's lap, one strong arm wrapped firmly around his body, his back pressed to Todoroki's chest. For a second, he doesn't dare speak. That's the second time today, Todoroki remarks. Izuku can feel the warmth of his breath against his ear. He can't help it, he shivers. Sorry, he whispers. Thanks. He doesn't think they've ever been this close before, not even when this same thing had happened on the plane. God, Todoroki is going to think he's doing this on purpose. He hadn't been holding Izuku quite so firmly then, and Izuku starts to scoot off his lap, face burning in shame, but Todoroki's arm around his waist tightens. Maybe you should stay here, he says, barely a whisper, like he's not sure he should be saying it. Izuku's breath catches in his throat. If you want, that might be safer. Izuku closes his eyes. This is likely the closest he will ever get to heaven, and he's not ready to leave just yet. And so, even though it's horrible of him, because Todoroki has obviously had a bit too much to drink, and probably currently doesn't have the best judgment, Izuku says, okay, I will. He feels, rather than sees, Todoroki nod. If you wanted to go talk to other people, though, that's fine. I'm not. I'd like to stay with you, Izuku tells him. Another nod. Okay, with my second favorite hero. He feels the huff of Todoroki's laugh flutter against the back of his neck. Izuku's chest is tight from how inflated his heart has become. All Might did say that could change, Todoroki reminds him. Izuku has to grin at this. You're welcome to try, Todoroki-san. So quietly, Izuku almost doesn't hear him. Todoroki murmurs, maybe I have been trying. Izuku doesn't get a chance to respond. They are waylaid by more of Todoroki's friends shortly thereafter, and Izuku scrambles off his lap to save him any unnecessary embarrassment. He still spends the rest of the party sitting pressed up against Todoroki's side, with Todoroki's arm draped over the back of the couch behind him. Todoroki doesn't seem to be the least bit bothered with subtlety, and Izuku is left to replay his words over and over in his head. All Might himself has already called him a hero that night. Maybe there are other impossible things that might not be as far out of reach as he thought. The after-party doesn't wind down until late. It's nearly 3 in the morning when they finally get back to their hotel. Izuku is exhausted, worn out from excitement and more interaction over the course of one evening than he's probably ever had before in his life, all with a group of people so much larger than life. They're literally on billboards all across his city. He's grown up hoping to get so much as an autograph from any of them. Tonight, he got phone numbers. And more than that, he got to know them, a little bit. The old saying warns against meeting your heroes, but he's more than glad that he did. He walks down the hallway of the hotel side by side with Todoroki, footsteps swallowed up by the plush carpet beneath their feet. Todoroki is quiet next to him, and Izuku feels overly aware of how close they're standing, their hands by their sides almost touching, but not quite. Todoroki-san, he says, did you enjoy yourself tonight? Me. Todoroki glances at him. Shouldn't I be the one asking you that? I feel like maybe the pressure is more on you, Izuku says. We both knew I'd have fun. Does that mean you did, then? Yes, Izuku says. Of course. This was amazing. Todoroki looks pleased. Good. That doesn't answer my question, though, Izuku wheedles. Todoroki doesn't respond for a few seconds. Finally, he says, I wasn't sure if I should invite you to the gala, or not. The admission comes as suddenly as a slap. Oh, Izuku says, the happy bubble in his chest deflating. He trips over his next words as old doubts surge back in. Oh, I hope you didn't feel like you had to, or like you were pressured in any way, or, no, I've just never asked anyone to an event before, Todoroki explains. I wasn't sure what you'd think. Honestly, I wasn't really sure what I was thinking, either. I just wanted. They've reached the door to Izuku's room, and Todoroki trails off as they stop in front of it. Wanted what? Izuku asks. His throat is tight. He's not sure what to feel. Everything had seemed like it was going so great, too good to be true. Had Todoroki just been humoring him all this time? Had he just felt bad for Izuku? Todoroki pauses. He rests his fist on the wall and then thumps it a few times, seemingly for good measure, before looking up at Izuku again. The cloudiness has disappeared from his expression. Any lingering effects from the alcohol appear to have worn off. I just wanted to be around you more, he says. First the interview, then at the agency, then just talking to you over the phone. Every time. I just didn't want any of them to be the last time. What? Oh, Izuku whispers. I knew inviting you to this would be a lot, Todoroki confesses. I didn't know if it was too much, or what would happen after. You already said it's been the best night of your life, so I know I can't top this. Wait, Izuku says, was the gala to try and impress me? No, Todoroki says. He sighs, running a hand over his face. FCK, I'm bad at this, I don't know what else to offer beyond this. You like hero stuff and this was a lot of hero stuff. Todoroki-san. Izuku says, shocked. You know I don't just like you because you're a pro, right? That's the entire reason you like me, actually. Todoroki points out, sounding very stressed. It is not, Izuku says. I know about you because you're a hero. I like you because of everything else about you. What, did you think I was just going to lose interest once we ran out of hero stuff to do? He stares Todoroki down, daring him to argue. No, Todoroki says hurriedly. I know you're not like that. You don't expect anything, but you should. You deserve this much. Izuku hides his face in the crook of his elbow. You're being ridiculous. What's ridiculous is that you think I'm amazing, Todoroki says, but I can't even. I've been trying to tell you, to make you realize that I got him it. He runs a hand through his carefully styled hair in frustration, mussing it up hopelessly as Izuku watches, stunned. I want to do all of this for you, but I can't even come up with something better than an agency tour and a free ticket I never would have even used otherwise to some party. Todoroki. Izuku yelps, cutting him off very rudely, but Izuku doesn't care at the moment. Just tell me, did you enjoy tonight, or not? Yes, Todoroki says. So did I, Izuku tells him. I mean, yes, tonight was the best night of my life, how could it not be? But not just because of all the hero stuff. It's mainly because I had a lot of fun with you. And if you somehow think that's not good enough for me, you're an idiot. Todoroki's eyes are very wide. Yeah, Izuku says. I like you a lot, Todoroki-san. Okay, Todoroki says. Right, okay. I like you a lot is the biggest understatement ever made. Perhaps an outright lie at this point. Izuku's heart is so full of fondness that it's threatening to hammer out of his chest. He has to do something about it, or it's going to explode, messy and rose-colored, all over the immaculate hotel hallway. He leans up onto his tiptoes, but he's still not quite tall enough, so he has to grab the lapels of Todoroki's jacket and tug him down a few inches. Briefly, trying not to think too much about it, he presses his mouth against Todoroki's in the quickest, softest kiss. It's the first one he's ever given anyone. Good night, Todoroki-san, he whispers. Thank you again for everything. Rapidly, he lets himself into his room, bowing to Todoroki's feet as he closes the door behind him. He leans back against it and stares up at the ceiling, and then squeezes his eyes shut. He just did that. What did he just do? Knock, knock, knock. The sound makes him leap away from the door. Oh, no. He stares at the glossy wood until the knock comes again, light and frantic, and it seems like he has no choice but to face fate. With a trembling hand, he reaches out and opens the door again, eyes still downcast. I'm sore. That's all he gets out. The door is flung wide open. Todoroki takes one step forward, and then two big hands are cupping Izuku's cheeks to tilt his face up. Warm lips are finding his, and Todoroki is kissing him in earnest, body pressed flush up against Izuku's own. Izuku. The way he says Izuku's name against his lips is all kinds of ruined, and the sound of it makes Izuku sob. A wordless gasp of pent-up longing and adoration all flooding out of him at once, and he's shaking, and his legs don't seem to be able to support him. And he's flinging his arms as tight as he can around Todoroki's neck as his hero in all things picks him up and carries him into the moonlit room beyond, kicking the door shut behind them so they can finally have each other. Izuku can't stifle the breathy gasp that punches from his lungs as Todoroki pushes him up against the wall just inside the room. He carries Izuku like it's nothing, holds him effortlessly in place. Todoroki's hands are on his ass. Izuku would have already expired over this, if he wasn't so preoccupied with everything else. 2. Todoroki-san, NNNH. The noises he's making are shameful, but he can't help himself, not when Todoroki is kissing him again with all the desperation that Izuku is feeling. Izuku is by no means a good kisser, he has no idea what he's doing, only that he can't stop doing it. Mouth falling open on another sigh as Todoroki's tongue swipes his lower lip gently. Todoroki exhales, shaky, and slips his tongue inside Izuku's mouth, and the room spins with how fast Izuku gets lightheaded as all the blood in his body rushes south. He tightens his legs around Todoroki's solid waist, knees gripping hard even though he's in no danger of falling. He doesn't want to let go, not now, not ever. He fists one hand in the back of Todoroki's suit jacket, pushes the other into his hair, and nearly cries. It's smoother than satin, softer than he's ever even imagined. It's impossibly good. He's never kissed anyone, but he thinks that even if he'd kissed 1,000 people before now, it probably wouldn't have been like this. Yes, admittedly, he's always had a vivid and active imagination, but it's never come close to the real thing. It's all so slow, and so wet, and warm, there's a strange heat building, almost in him, starting at the back of his throat. Someone else's tongue in his mouth seems like it should be weird, but when Todoroki's tangles with his own, Izuku starts shaking. Todoroki shifts against him like he's trying to get even closer, somehow. With the way he has Izuku pinned, that's definitely too much, but it's also perfect, and Izuku lets out a frantic, shaky moan as Todoroki's hips press into his. That heat he keeps swallowing flares hotter, too fast, and then Todoroki jerks away from him suddenly. Izuku pinches his lips together, but a thin whimper of protest still escapes him. His hands move like they don't belong to him anymore. He tugs at Todoroki uselessly, trying to bring him back. He needs Todoroki closer, needs him. Todoroki is panting, maybe even harder than Izuku. He turns his head, slightly, exhales, steam billows from his mouth out into the room, and Izuku realizes he wasn't imagining the heat. 1 second, Todoroki says, strained. Todoroki-san. Izuku can't help but feel nervous over every little thing. Did he do something wrong? He realizes he's still clutching at Todoroki's jacket and forces himself to loosen his grip. I can't, Todoroki starts, voice uneven. He clears his throat and then looks back at Izuku. Their foreheads are nearly touching and Izuku feels trapped by his stare. He's suddenly so much closer than ever before. Even in the moonlight, or maybe because of it, his eyes are gorgeous. I'm having trouble regulating my internal temperature, Todoroki explains. I didn't want to burn your tongue. Oh, Izuku blinks and then understands. Oh, that's a thing that happens. When I'm aroused, Todoroki states point blank. Oh my gosh, Izuku whispers. Now Todoroki looks nearly as embarrassed as him. I should have asked if you're okay with this. Why yes, Izuku yelps. Are you? You're kidding, right? Todoroki asks. When Izuku shakes his head, he frowns. Why wouldn't I be? Izuku stammers. I'm the one who kissed you. Out of nowhere. And I don't want you to feel like. I know I'm just. He trails off into nothing. It had been hard to look away from Todoroki before, and now Izuku can't meet his eyes. That's when Todoroki sets him back down to stand on his own. It's gentle, but Izuku's heart sinks as he's lowered. When his feet finally hit the floor, it grounds him. Right. Well, he's just glad he said something early, before they got swept up in the moment and Todoroki did something he would regret later. He's just himself, after all, plain, quirkless, Midoriya Izuku. The telltale burning starts at the corner of his eyes, and he blinks rapidly, knowing once it starts it'll never stop. Todoroki, I'm glad you're braver than I am, Todoroki says, cutting him off. Because I've been trying for days to figure out how to kiss you tonight. Izuku looks up at him so fast, teardrops go flying. Todoroki shakes his head, whispering Izuku's name so fondly that it makes his knees wobbly again. He closes his eyes as Todoroki raises a hand to sweep the tears away with his fingers. What? Izuku asks croakily. I've wanted to kiss you, Todoroki tells him, for a long time. I want to kiss you again, right now. Can I? Izuku tries in vain to swallow the lump in his throat. Why yeah. Todoroki doesn't give him a chance to second guess. He surges forward, and Izuku can only cling to him, arms flung as best he can across Todoroki's broad back in an effort to stay upright. It's making him dizzy all over again. Todoroki seeking his way into his mouth. It feels a little filthier, like Todoroki is holding back less, and Izuku never wants it to stop. He breathes Todoroki in and kisses back, and the heat starts to swell, but he's too afraid to say anything that would make Todoroki stop. But Todoroki at least knows himself, and as soon as it reaches a peak that's almost sharp against Izuku's tongue, he pulls away. Izuku wants to whine but he stays quiet, and he's rewarded the next moment, when Todoroki kisses him just below his ear instead, lips of firebrand whisper on his skin. It's like heaven, as Todoroki moves his mouth over his jaw, down his neck. And then there's the sudden sharp pressure of teeth, shocking and raw, before the slck wet of Todoroki's tongue soothes over the bite, and Izuku can't think anymore. This can't be happening. Something like this could never really happen to him, can it? There's no way Todoroki could want what? Todoroki asks, and Izuku realizes he's actually been babbling out loud. He gasps as Todoroki's breath steams over his throat, leaving him literally hot under the collar, boiling. The jacket and vest, the layers, are all becoming restrictive. What couldn't I want? Todoroki asks insistently. Me, Izuku whispers. Todoroki touches his fingers to the top button of Izuku's shirt. His stare is determined. I'll convince you. Izuku nods deliriously. Please. He tilts his head back when Todoroki slips the top button undone. As he bares Izuku's throat one button at a time, his lips follow, tracing every newly revealed inch of skin with painstaking attentiveness. Izuku melts under his mouth and hands, barely able to do more than choke down the whines that keep bubbling up in his throat. Todoroki is moving so slowly, hands sliding lower and lower down Izuku's front as he undoes his vest buttons and pushes it open. Izuku wants Todoroki to convince him faster. He lets go of Todoroki for the first time since they started, hands flying to his shirt to rapidly unfasten the rest of his buttons. Todoroki's eyes widen, watching as Izuku clumsily tries to loosen the knot of his tie. Sorry, Izuku mutters, wishing he'd just been patient, because now his fingers are stuck and he looks ridiculous. I'm bad with knots. Shit, Todoroki rasps, and then Izuku smells something burning, and looks up to see Todoroki shrugging off his jacket as fast as possible. Shit. Why your sleeve? Izuku squeaks, which is unnecessary, because it seems like Todoroki is all too aware that his shirt is literally going up in flames before their eyes. Todoroki strips out of his clothes so fast that Izuku barely has time to register what's happening. His vest goes flying, and he doesn't bother with more than the top few buttons of his shirt before yanking it over his head as the left sleeve smolders red-orange. Not quite on fire yet, but close. Todoroki stamps it out with his foot. He says, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. The movement makes the muscles of his bare chest shift and flex, and Izuku's mouth goes dry as he stares. These are the abs he's dreamed about for years, the cess that fueled all his hormonal fantasies since he knew what hormones were. Todoroki's muscles are even hotter up close. Maybe slightly less defined or sculpted in person than they would be in a photo shoot, thanks to makeup or touched-up photos, but Izuku likes that. In reality, Todoroki is strong and toned and big, all over. He's perfect. Unthinkingly, Izuku reaches out to touch him. He yanks his hand back in surprise. Todoroki's left side is radiating heat. Even though it's not quite hot enough to burn, it's enough to startle him, like getting too close to a lit stove. Izuku. Todoroki grabs his wrist with his cooler right hand, and Izuku hazily registers the fact that the pro hero seems to use his first name by default now when he's worried. That's exactly what I was trying to avoid. I'm fine. Izuku reassures him. He can feel the scorching heat fading, as Todoroki regains some control of himself. Whether that's because he's focusing harder on getting it in check, or because his tongue is no longer down Izuku's throat is unclear. FCK, Todoroki murmurs, holding Izuku's fingers up to inspect them. I swear I'm pretty good at controlling my quirk usually. Yeah, I've seen you do it plenty of times. Izuku can't stop himself giggling anyway, giddy laughter spilling out. He's not laughing at Todoroki, really. He's just unable to process that Todoroki nearly burned through a designer suit because of him. Sorry, Todoroki says, right before he sticks Izuku's fingers in his mouth, and Izuku's brain short-circuits. Is all he manages. Todoroki's breath, now chilled and icy, cools the lingering sting in his fingers. His eyes go half-lidded, red and white lashes lowering. His cheeks hollowing out as he sucks, and then Todoroki holds Izuku's fingers up to his lips and LCKS between them, tongue deliciously cold, sending shivers racing up Izuku's spine. He laves his tongue between the middle and forefinger, SLCking them up in a manner that is far more suggestive than a mere first aid application. Oh my god, Todoroki-sen. Overwhelmed, he lets his head fall back as Todoroki pins his wrists to the wall on either side of his head and kisses him again. His body is just pleasantly warm now, but his mouth is cold in contrast. Izuku groans as one of Todoroki's thighs slips between his legs, making him spread them apart wider. This time, Izuku doesn't stop himself from rocking against him, and Todoroki doesn't go still or pull away. If this had been just 10 minutes ago, Izuku thinks he would have been too embarrassed to ever do what he's doing now. But it's almost like his body is making up for his nerves at this point, and he needs Todoroki, and he can't stop until he gets what he wants. He's embarrassingly hard already considering they've barely done anything yet. But Todoroki is letting him grind against his leg, pressing back to allow Izuku the friction he needs. He slides his hand down to grip Izuku's ass, pulling him in more firmly, and Izuku realizes he's in trouble. Wait, Todoroki-san, I'm going to, gonna. It's a close call. Todoroki freezes up immediately as Izuku grips his shoulders, teeth gritted, toes curling in his shoes. Todoroki letting him grind against his leg, helping him chase his pleasure, goes straight to his head as well as his DCK, which is so hard that it hurts. Just the thought that Todoroki wants to touch him, wants to make him feel good like this, is enough to shove Izuku towards an early orgasm. We have to go a little slower, he manages to gasp. Or I'm going to. It's too humiliating to say. He can't be finished yet, not when they've hardly done anything and Todoroki has barely touched him. Besides being embarrassing, he doesn't want this to end, not that fast. Okay, Todoroki says immediately. We don't have to do anything you don't want. I could just kiss you all night, and that would be more than enough. Izuku shivers again, full body. That does sound very nice, but it's not what he wants right now. No, it's not that. I want to keep going. I just have to, when you touch me, I think it makes everything happen too fast. Todoroki doesn't laugh at him. He nods and seems to be mulling it over. Finally he says, I might have an idea. Can we? He glances toward the bed, and Izuku blushes, nodding too quickly. He feels like bringing that into the equation can only make his problem more pronounced. But, he feels like he's walking in a dream when Todoroki takes his hand and leads him further into the room. What now? Izuku asks hesitantly, once he's sitting on the bed, back against the headboard, legs stretched out awkwardly in front of him. I thought, if I don't touch you directly, maybe it'll be fine. Todoroki ventures. He's sitting on the edge of the bed, like he doesn't want to overwhelm Izuku again by coming too close. Which isn't what Izuku wants, it's just that he's hopeless. You weren't touching me directly before, Izuku reminds him. I mean, at all, Todoroki says. I'm not going to do anything, you touch yourself. Izuku's mouth falls open. What? Wait, but then, what will you do? Todoroki swallows. Oh, watch. Oh, Izuku squeaks. He covers his face as his cheeks start to burn. You wanna watch me? Unless you don't want that, Todoroki says instantly. No, it's okay. Izuku yelps, surprising himself. Let Todoroki watch him. The idea in itself is terrible. Izuku can only guess at the kinds of ridiculous, stupid faces he makes when he's masturbating, and he is fairly sure he doesn't want Todoroki to see a single one of them. But if Todoroki can't touch him or watch him, then what else is there? Slowly, he undoes the fastening of his slacks, pushes them off his legs. He spares a brief prayer of thanks that he did not wear his All Might boxers for luck tonight, or worse, the half and half Shouto briefs. The pair he has on are just dark green, and obviously tinted at the front, and he quickly covers the evidence with both hands in embarrassment. Todoroki is going to think he's useless for getting excited this easily. He'll think Izuku is gross. Todoroki ducks down and kisses his wobbly mouth again. You're okay, he breathes, and Izuku breathes with him, deep and slow. It's really okay if you don't want me to look, either. What if? Izuku watches, first in confusion, then understanding, as Todoroki reaches out to loosen his tangled tie carefully. Somehow the knot that had seemed so impossible for Izuku to undo falls away easily under Todoroki's fingertips, until he can slide the tie from around Izuku's neck, holding the dark green silk in his hands. Will you tie it for me? He asks Izuku. Izuku bites his lip nervously, and can't help but notice how instantly Todoroki's gaze is drawn downwards to his mouth. Are you sure? Todoroki seems to give in, then. He leans in and brushes his lips over Izuku's. I trust you. God. Izuku shivers as he feels the tie being pressed into his hand, wraps his fingers around it. Todoroki pulls back just enough to let Izuku shakily place the soft silk over his eyes, nodding it behind his head to secure it in place. Okay. There, Izuku says nervously. Todoroki stretches out a hand, patting around blindly until he finds Izuku's. He curls their fingers around each other, which is familiar. Now, after all the hand-holding at the gala, it relaxes Izuku, knowing that Todoroki is fine with this, and still wants to touch him, regardless of how weird it is that Izuku basically can't even handle him keeping his eyes open during sex. God, he thinks again. Todoroki could have anyone, but he's settling for this. Todoroki slowly leans forward, until he can bump his face against Izuku's. He tries to kiss Izuku again, not seeming to care that he can't quite find Izuku's mouth on his first try, which makes Izuku have to stifle a sudden fit of giggles. Well, at least that means the blindfold is on properly, he thinks, out of his mind with nerves and desire as he helps meet Todoroki's mouth to kiss him back. It's so deliberately sweet that it makes Izuku melt. It's not too tight, is it? He murmurs, in between tentative explorations of Todoroki's lips. It's fine. You really don't have to do this for me. He feels it's unfair somehow, that he gets to have everything, see everything, while Todoroki isn't allowed to touch and now can't even look. Not that Izuku thinks he's all that much for Todoroki to look at, but it's the principle of the matter. It's unequal. Todoroki brings a hand up and brushes his fingers over Izuku's face, quiet at first. He still seems to be figuring out where things are, before he presses his fingers to Izuku's lips, tracing his mouth. His thumb drags there, the only barrier between them. It's more effective than his quirk, makes Izuku's lips feel achingly oversensitive when Todoroki puts his mouth right up against his thumb so his words buzz and vibrate against Izuku's skin. It's like fire roaring through Izuku's veins when Todoroki speaks, hoarse and longing and undeniably desperate for it. I really think I'd do anything for you. A soft moan leaks from Izuku's lips, but it doesn't get far before Todoroki swallows it, mouth sealing over Izuku's, drinking down every little noise he makes. The kisses are clumsier now, wetter and messier, because Todoroki can't see what he's doing and Izuku is too far gone to do anything but let himself be overwhelmed with affection. Todoroki's hair is fully a mess now, and he looks so good with it falling down over the dark strip of cloth covering his eyes. He's at Izuku's mercy, blind and wrapped up and waiting. It makes Izuku's breath shaky, whiny, to know that Todoroki insisted on exactly this. And no peeking, he whispers into Todoroki's mouth, and Todoroki groans like he's said something especially sassy, which Izuku doesn't think that he has, but wow, it's incredible, feeling needed like this. Swear I won't, Todoroki mumbles distractedly, nipping at Izuku's lips. Do you want to? You can touch yourself, now. Oh, Izuku hiccups. It's more out of necessity than anything else at that point that makes him go for it. He presses a hand down against the damp front of his underwear unthinkingly, hips riding up, FCK. His breath stutters in his throat, eyes slipping shut. Izuku, Todoroki murmurs, and Izuku pants at it, the sound of his name, said with that intent. He grinds his palm down against the front of his briefs again and groans. You sound so good. No, I mean it, Todoroki says. His lips are so distracting, the way he brushes them across Izuku's cheek until he finds the spot just below Izuku's ear. Izuku can't stop the breathless gasps that spill from him as Todoroki sucks on the skin there. In fact, he's so distracted that he can't respond in any way to Todoroki. He can only a hand over himself clumsily through his underwear while Todoroki murmurs praise into his skin, warm and determined. Your voice is it's cute, Todoroki whispers, and Izuku whines in embarrassment. I'm glad I can finally tell you. Have you been waiting to tell me? Izuku asks, incredulous. That seems impossible. Not just that his voice is cute to Todoroki, but that Todoroki likes it enough that he's contemplated the need to make that fact known. I know it's weird, Todoroki confesses. He noses his way under Izuku's jaw, mouth hot under Izuku's chin, kissing anywhere, everywhere he can reach, it feels like. Izuku's pulse hammers so hard it almost hurts. Is that his heart? Is that even safe? How fast it's beating? I thought. He might realize. How would I have? I always called you, Todoroki says softly, instead of texting. Oh, Izuku says, equally soft. He chances a glance down at Todoroki and, oh no, he thinks he can see a faint hint of red spreading across his cheeks. He seems to sense Izuku is looking, head lifting to blindly turn towards him. You really think that? Yeah, Todoroki breathes. I like listening to you. Izuku's breath hitches in shock. Not like, Todoroki rushes to say, not in a weird way. Though, after this, I think I'm probably screwed. Oh, God, Izuku says, and hiccups a laugh. I was already, that time you called me during a workout. Thought about it a lot after. FCK, Todoroki mutters, leaning closer again. Definitely screwed, now. Even when he kisses Izuku senseless, he stays true to his word, utterly careful. He doesn't touch, hands braced on either side of Izuku's body, and the blindfold stays firmly on. It makes it even worse somehow. This cursory degree of separation between them makes Izuku squirm and pant, desperate to feel more of Todoroki's lips and tongue. Izuku keens. To Todoroki-sen. You can use my first name, Todoroki tells him, like he always does. I can no, Izuku says, I'm just used to. It's too much to. It's okay, Todoroki tells him. He moves away, though, and Izuku worries briefly that he's getting frustrated. Before he realizes where Todoroki is going. Izuku's eyes fly open wide as Todoroki slides lower on the bed, ducks his head so his lips land like a whisper brushing against Izuku's stomach. To do. He cuts off as Todoroki presses a barely there kiss to the V of his hips next. He trails his mouth low across Izuku's stomach, so soft each kiss barely lands, and Izuku throws his head back so fast it bangs on the headboard. He's moaning, just seeing Todoroki down there, voluntarily sightless and so close to him, is so much to deal with. He grips his CCK through his briefs, loosely fisting it through the fabric. Izuku, Todoroki says again, lips touching just above the waistband of his underwear, words tattooing into his skin. Don't ever think you're not worth wanting. Please. I'm. Todoroki kisses one of his hip bones gently. I want to watch you, too. Izuku tells his nerves to take a hike. He hooks his fingers in his briefs and shoves them down, and his DCK springs free, right in front of Todoroki's nose. Before he can overthink anything, he reaches out, shaking fingers fumbling with the blindfold over Todoroki's eyes, before he gives up on the knot and drags the tie off Todoroki's head, leaving his hair a disaster in its wake. Why you can look, he says, all in one terrifyingly brave exhale. Todoroki's wide eyes blink in surprise. They focus quickly and clearly on the back and forth pendulum swaying of Izuku's DCK. He swallows. Can I touch you? Izuku whimpers. Why yes. Todoroki stays cautious, slow. He kisses the bare tops of Izuku's legs, before nudging them farther apart so he can put his mouth to the insides of Izuku's thighs. His lips scorch Izuku everywhere they touch, making him gasp, helpless soft cries of pleasure. He doesn't even care that Todoroki can see everything. That his legs are open wide, that Todoroki is between them, kissing the ghost-pale freckled skin of his knees. Todoroki keeps his thighs spread with a hand on each, fingers splayed and squeezing like he can't get enough, can of his fill of Izuku. He nips at Izuku with his teeth, drags his tongue over trembling thighs, tastes him. All the while he remains maddeningly near, Izuku can feel steaming breath ghosting over his CCK, reaches down to trail his fingers over himself and shudders violently, his whole body sweetly tormented by non-stop, uncontrollable shivering. Close. Todoroki mumbles into his thigh, and he nods, incoherent. Then, he grabs Izuku's hips and drags him closer, and then Todoroki is diving down, lips parting to take Izuku's CCK between them, surrounding him with wet heat. Izuku chokes out a sob that is nearly a scream. Holy shit. Shouto. He's never felt anything like it, heat and wet and tight, almost painful in its intensity. He buries a hand in Todoroki's hair. He needs to hold onto something or he's going to slip away into a void of stars and sensation. And then Todoroki bobs his head up and down, gaze FLC King up so their eyes lock, so Todoroki can watch him, just like he said he wanted to. Izuki comes instantly. He can't stop himself, can't even warn Todoroki beyond his leg jerking once, erratically, and his fingers scrabbling in Todoroki's silky hair. It's like lightning hitting him right between the eyes. The world flashes white. and then dark a second later, like a negative image superimposed over his vision. The shivers racing up and down his spine now are white-hot pleasure, sending fresh waves of tears rolling down his cheeks. He's moaning, he can feel the noises tearing from his throat, but he can't hear them. The first thing he registers through the unending golden haze is a hand clutching his, and he blinks his eyes open once he realizes they're closed. Todoroki's face swims into view, his mouth open in shock, eyes wide. There's a splatter of white on his chin that he doesn't appear to realize is there. Sorry, he says, I thought it was okay if you were about to come, are you? Shouto, Izuku gasps again, and Todoroki's eyes light up all warm and surprised. You have to touch yourself, too, I can't be the only one to just. He ends up yanking at Todoroki's fitted black pants until Todoroki manages to kick them off haphazardly. The distractions are too numerous to do anything properly, as Izuku grabs at his face to kiss him again, not caring that it tastes a little bitter, as Todoroki rolls over on top of him. All warm bare skin and hard muscle making Izuku feel tiny as he's pressed into the mattress, as Todoroki pumps a hand over his own CCK, rolling his hips down into Izuku at the same time. Desperately. The friction is a little over the edge of overstimulation for Izuku, but he can't stop himself from wanting more, either. His first orgasm almost knocked him unconscious, but a second is already building, buzzing up from his toes, making his legs quiver and the pool of lava low in his belly pull tight. See, can't believe I get to touch you, Izuku babbles, trailing his fingers over Todoroki's face, his neck. He takes a deep breath and then goes for it, running his hands down Todoroki's chest. He cups one of Todoroki's firm pecs in each hand and squeezes, kneading the smooth muscle under his fingers. He feels like an absolute pervert. Scratch that, he is a pervert. Todoroki is laughing at him, though not meanly, breathless, almost soundless, in between each gasp of pleasure. I'll like it when you touch me, he tells Izuku. I don't think anyone's ever enjoyed touching me this much, actually. Hey, Izuku protests, thoroughly chastised and enjoying it much more than he probably should. After one mind-blowing climax, he feels loopy and loose and lucid. He pushes at Todoroki's shoulder, and Todoroki goes over easily, flopping onto his back on the bed. The way Todoroki is looking up at him emboldens Izuku, parted lips, lidded eyes, hair a must-tumult of mixed white and red. Todoroki likes him. He pulls himself up, slides a leg over Todoroki's waist. Todoroki's hands settle on his hips as Izuku straddles him, and Izuku may as well be on top of the world, in this luxury penthouse, flushed and naked over the hips of one of the strongest heroes. His hero. Of course I enjoy it the most, he says with a smile so sincere it hurts his cheeks. I'm your #1 fan. You're more than that, Todoroki says, fingers squeezing his hips. Izuku, you're so much more. Todoroki throws his head back in the pillows as Izuku starts to grind down on him, their CCKs sliding together on his belly, sticky with sweat and Izuku's cum. The coarse line of hair that trails down from there to his CCK is half red, half white, Izuku realizes. Fascinated, he scrapes his fingers through it, and feels Todoroki's stomach muscles jolt at his touch. He leans forward, bracing his hands on Todoroki's shoulders so he can slide against him more easily. There's so much skin on skin his head is starting to fog up again, his eyes watering with how much he's feeling. The way their bodies fit together, the sounds Todoroki is making for him, the way he looks as he lets Izuku bring him to the edge, it's all pure, unfiltered bliss. I want to make you feel good, Izuku pants. For everything Todoroki has done for him, whether on purpose or unknowingly, Izuku wants to return it, double it, multiply it by infinity. Because you're mine. Todoroki gasps, and Izuku thinks for a second he sees a tendril of flame spark from the left side of his face, but then Todoroki grabs his arms, pulling him down until Izuku is pressed against his chest. He buries a hand in Izuku's hair and swears into Izuku's ear, voice low and raspy and throbbing. Fu FCK, Izuku. Todoroki comes messy and warm between them, and Izuku follows, clutching at his shoulders as he cries out unsteadily. Todoroki shakes under him, trembling, full body shudders as his orgasm punches through him in wave after wave. Izuku's is a little softer, after the first, but not by much, it wrings him dry and boneless, and when he's done, all he can do is slump onto Todoroki unmoving. Everything is gross and sticky, and he doesn't give a damn. Todoroki's breathing starts to even out, ruffling into Izuku's hair, and Izuku shifts to nuzzle against his neck, completely sated. The pro-hero turns to steal another kiss, long and lingering and soft. Did I convince you? Todoroki murmurs. Izuku smiles. Yeah, it's strange, because a lot of things still seem like they came right out of a fairy tale. Meeting Todoroki, becoming his friend, becoming something more. The public attention and the luxury treatment fit for royalty. And the gala. It's also unbelievable that it feels like none of it could have really happened to Izuku. But one thing Todoroki makes damn sure Izuku can't doubt are his feelings. Forget the sec, it's the way he kisses Izuku's soapy fingers in the shower as they wash up. It's the way he smiles with his eyes when he leans their foreheads together as he towels Izuku's hair mostly dry. It's the way he says Izuku's name when they're just talking, curled up in bed again with the covers over their heads. Any one of those would be enough to convince Izuku, now that he finally gets it. He's not nobody. He's the guy who saved Todoroki Shouto, and the one who liked him from the start. and Shouto wants him. A morning entertainment channel plays on the hotel room television, but neither Izuku nor Todoroki are paying very much attention to it. Are you sure? Yes, Todoroki-san, if you keep asking I'm going to change my mind. Okay. I just want to make sure you're comfortable. Well, it'll feel a little weird, but I don't mind if it's you. A knock on the door announcing the arrival of room service makes Izuku startle and look up from his phone. Accept my follow request, Todoroki tells him, hopping out of bed. He grabs one of the plush hotel robes to slip on, but not before Izuku gets another glance at the masterpiece that is his bare ass. Todoroki seems to have no qualms with wandering around the room entirely, but Izuku still feels shy. Fortunately, Todoroki has loaned him one of his undershirts, which is so big on Izuku that he can practically swim in it. He's been rolling around in it all morning, in the bed that they've yet to vacate, because Todoroki is VIP enough to get away with checking out whenever he wants. They aren't flying back until that evening. Afternoon plans include savoring some of the best food Hokkaido has to offer. Morning plans include savoring more of each other. This has, however, resulted in Izuku's Twitter being brought up again, to his dismay. He would have gladly avoided the subject forever, but it's much harder to do when Todoroki asks him innocently if Izuku would consider adding him now, lying with his head pillowed on Izuku's stomach, his shoulders just looking the way they do. Izuku had capitulated, because Todoroki must have realized at this point that Izuku is as thirsty for him as a man in the middle of the desert with no water supply. There shouldn't be any surprises on his Twitter, especially not after last night. Still, he is acutely nervous, watching Todoroki heft the breakfast tray in one hand, as he closes the door behind him with his foot, making his way back over to the bed. Oh, wow, Izuku says, momentarily distracted by the impressive array of options on each plate. Todoroki checks his phone. Ah, you accepted. He CLCKS on Izuku's profile, and starts scrolling. Don't look at it now. Izuku screeches. Why not? Todoroki asks. When did you even get the chance to retweet this much meta about the winners of the awards last night? Before you woke up. Izuku says. He may be a private account, but he likes to keep his timeline updated, for his own analysis purposes. Todoroki looks like he's trying not to smile, when something must catch his eye. He squints at his phone screen. Is this a photoset of my back muscles? Izuku chokes on the quail egg he just started eating. Izuku, do you follow an entire Twitter dedicated to my? They post a lot of up-to-the-minute updates about you. Izuku shrieks, diving at Todoroki to grab his phone. The entire breakfast tray nearly gets overturned in the ensuing scuffle, which ends with Izuku lying flat on top of Todoroki, pinning the pro-hero's arms above his head to prevent him from finding even more damning evidence. Izuku suspects Todoroki let him win. I'm not too bothered, Todoroki says, his expression sly. I'm just glad I could catch your eye in the way I have. Todoroki-san, Izuku tells him, leaning in to kiss him, shut up. In the background, the talk show still plays, now airing footage of the gala. The glitz and glamour of the event has been captured from every angle, and what many stations seem most interested in focusing on is the subject of Todoroki's unexpected guest. They replay Todoroki's and Izuku's arrival on the red carpet, the interview with Kaminari, their interactions with other heroes inside the hall. Pictures and video have surfaced of Izuku speaking to All Might, though the media seem to have been prevented from getting close enough to overhear their conversation. And Todoroki's acceptance speech has been repeated almost non-stop, on every outlet, every social media platform. Most of the cameras were trained on him, but there are some videos that show Izuku's reactions. In case how he felt about Todoroki wasn't obvious to people already, it is now, by the way Izuku watches him. Izuku might have been embarrassed by that, before. Now he just thinks it's easier than having to tell everyone himself. And I wanted to win it for you, as a thank you for saving me, and for believing in me since the start. Todoroki's voice plays over the speakers, and then the two TV show hosts are back, familiar voices waxing sentimental about the entire thing. Why? Mori says, it feels like it really came full circle. The whole story is incredible. Kanda agrees. The two of them truly are remarkable. The program continues on, though the two people the hosts are discussing have more important things to do, and don't hear it. But if they had, they would agree, remarkable is a pretty good word for it, after all.